And now we're live.
Great.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Goal 5 Rules Advisory Committee. We are a RAC. And to be able to have conversations that promote public policy that honors the people and the place, that's our privileged task this afternoon. We're continuing what's well begun, making good progress, I think. And I'm delighted to be here with you. I welcome you all and look forward to hearing what we can develop today in terms of good public policy.
Thank you. Thank you. So we do have a full agenda. This is our, I think it's our 4th meeting together. And our last kind of regularly scheduled meeting before the filing with the Secretary of State for the formal public comment period. My name is Kirsten Green. I'm the Deputy Director here at the Department of Land Conservation and Development, and I also have the honor and responsibility of serving as the agency's tribal liaison, as delegated by Director Brenda Bate. You guys all got the packet. Thank you for making time during the middle of summer to be with us. We want to touch on kind of what's ahead, the draft fiscal impact statement, and of course, the main event is the draft rule. We did keep this meeting at 3 hours. Welcome, Jill. We kept this meeting at 3 hours because that is our normal. We've needed that time. Even though the best time for most was from, you guys check the box, from 3 to 5. So if anyone does need to leave at 5, please just kind of let us know out loud. And we want to make sure to hear any questions or concerns you have before you go. I want to thank everyone that filled out the survey. Those results are in your packet. We had 3 extra detailed comments from committee members, including Sarah Palmer, the Capella Indian Tribe, and also Ed Sullivan, and I believe the 3rd set was City of Portland. So Nicholas, thank you for that. And why don't we just dive right in? Is there any questions or concerns right off the top that people want to make or share?
About the rules themselves, or?
Yeah, like in our meeting today, I want to be sure to cover this. Meaning you fill in the blank. Yeah, Cassie, your hand is up, please, ma'am.
Yeah, I just want to raise, I have some concern that, a lot of the changes that we talked about in our last 2 meetings, I didn't see reflected in here. And so I think we need to spend some time talking about that.
Right, Cassie, and Cassie, forgive me, yours was the set of detail. Well, I know that you filled out the survey very in a great amount of detail. So there may have been reasons why not, but let's talk through them all. And if we need more time, we'll just add another meeting, the next couple of days. So thank you. Nick.
Yeah, 2 things. When we get to it, I'd like to spend some time, particularly on section 5 and how you all, sort of in English language versus rule language, how you see the local, what the intent is for the local noticing and protection measures, like how you see it working at the counter and with land use reviews, just so I understand the intent. And then second, I'm particularly interested in hearing today from our tribal colleagues about their understanding of the notification section, because as it's written, I'm afraid that the tribes will be getting upwards of 1,000 notices a year from across the state. And I'm not sure that we've really, as a group, talked about that load. And maybe I've got it wrong, but the city of Portland has anywhere from 400 to 1,000 land use review notices go out every year. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page on that. Thanks.
Yeah, no, Nicholas, thank you. That's the reality check. And for sure, I know we've raised that, and we'll hear from representatives today. That's a good invitation and a good quantification as well. We know it would be numerous, but thank you for the number, just from City of Portland. So, great. Okay, well, let's press on. Amanda, do you have a PowerPoint to share? If not, I could go through the commission hearing schedule by heart. I cannot
I
recall.
do not,
if
I
we-
do not have a PowerPoint to share.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm mixing it up with the one from the webinar. So I'll do this from the transmittal memo. So you have this in front of you. But this is, as I say, the last final meeting before the rule filing on September 1st. That does not mean we will have everything right. I can guarantee you we won't. We just are humans, and this is a quick process and a very complicated one. So the reason to publish in the Secretary of State's bulletin, and it comes out on September 1st, that's probably a weekend day, but we don't control that. It's the first of every month. The reason to publish there, it provides broad public notice to anyone who might want to comment on the rules. And then we'll have a public comment period. Certainly continue tribal consultation between, to and through that first hearing in September, which is September, I believe, 24th and 25th, the Thursday and Friday of the last week in September. And then we kind of keep the comment period open through October 15th or 16th. We haven't landed on that exact date. There's a couple other rulemakings. We're trying to align all those dates, so it's not terribly confusing for folks. But about 6 weeks of formal public comment, to and through a public hearing at the commission, where Commissioner Thompson, of course, is our liaison, State's Land Conservation Development Commission, and then staff will go dark once again to consider all the comments and prepare a final draft rule for the commission packet for their early December meeting, which is December 4th and 5th. So that means that packet would be published in late November, but there's not an opportunity to make public comment at that late time. That would be up to the commission to deliberate on that and make a rule. So that's the path ahead. And are there any questions or corrections or comments on that? Public consultation follows a different path than public comment for obvious reasons. They're sovereign nations. But that is the public comment process that is outlined. And then even once rules are passed, I will say that the commission is consistent in saying, hey, for example, with the climate friendly and the equitable communities rules, the housing rules, we're trying our best. They passed rules. We have had to amend both. So I would foresee, if, working to implement this, and if things are unworkable in any regard, like too many notices for tribes, any other reason, I would recommend the commission consider amending accordingly. So it's never over in land use planning. It's a journey of honestly learning and practice together with cities and counties. So, okay, there's no hands up for that. Let's just turn right into the fiscal impact statement. I know that there's a couple of changes that our director would like to see, and we know that I want to make sure that we have that SHPO and the Heritage Program at state parks has the opportunity to comment on their impacts. That's not necessarily in that there yet. And then also same for the Legislative Commission on Indian Services. So the fiscal impact statement is the part where we are required to take Rules Advisory Committee member review. So if you have any, questions or corrections on that, please get them to us by November 23rd. Jerry did the best job he could, our consultant Jerry Johnson, and this fiscal impact statement is in 3 parts. It is fiscal, housing, and racial equity. But by state statute, actually, the part that we are required to show and share with Rulemaking Advisory Committee members and collect your impact is that fiscal impact statement that starts on page 10. So I'm just going to kind of touch on it. You should have the packets in front of you, so I don't want to necessarily, lose the faces on the screen by sharing, but Jerry recounts that the primary impacts would be, compliance costs for local governments to add sites, notice of the development permits, and provide notice to tribes. We note that this new division would take the place of Division 16 for cultural areas. And Jerry does conclude there's a potential for increased costs to public and private landowners and developers to comply with measures adopted by a local government to limit or prohibit impacts to landscape areas of cultural significance. And then, yet Jerry does conclude that the fiscal impact of the proposed rule would be expected to range from negligible to modest, depending on the jurisdiction and the presence of both five culturally significant sites. He says, for the subset of cultural areas that are archaeological sites, the proposed rule is not expected to have any substantive fiscal impact. Reducing the incidences of inadvertent discovery may result in time and cost savings for property owners and developers. So the impact statements continues with impacts specifically to small and large businesses, local governments, and state agency costs. There we would want to amplify that with SHPO and LCIS. And for local governments, Jerry cites that the fiscal impacts are related to the cost of compliance. They're both monetary and time, and would be associated with outreach, applying the rule to cultural areas at the time of urban growth boundary amendment, adding protection measures for culturally significant landscape areas, amending local development regulations, notification to the federally recognized sites, and coordinating with DLCD during review. So I'd love to know if there's any rules advisory committee members today that have questions or concerns about any of that phrasing in that draft. Please, Dave.
Well, this all makes me a little nervous. I would anticipate that there would, depending on the local jurisdiction and the department, there could be significant impacts to property owners, especially with the ability to do the cultural landscape features of cultural interest. That can encompass many hundreds of acres, or maybe thousands of acres. And then depending on what either the state or the county did to choose how to protect that resource or not to protect that resource is going to have a pretty significant impact. And obviously, they will be required to do Measure 56 notice as well. So until, I don't think it's fair to say in the fiscal statement that this is going to have a negligible impact on property owners. If you think that way, you haven't dealt with some of the counties that I deal with.
Dave, thank you. And you mentioned, I want to just flag on my own notes, you mentioned the Measure 56 notice, so that would come in. So this is, and Kimberly, thank you, we'll get right over to you. The Measure 56 notice, Dave, do you want I could summarize it from my perspective, but you also know it very well. Would you mind giving folks listening a little thumbnail on Measure 56 notice?
Well, if the Measure 56 notice is required when the state or local government wants to change its land use regulations in a way that that's going to change the ability of a property owner to use their land, and it's a relatively simple notice, but it's a mailing informing the property owner of a scheduled hearing and that they can appear, and here's where they can get copies of the proposed ordinance, and it's got to be mailed to everyone that's potentially impacted. It's one thing if we're talking about, cultural archaeological sites that are limited to, a particular property or another. It's another thing when we're talking about landscape features of cultural significance. I mean, that could be a very broad area that impacts potentially thousands of property owners. And depending on what the regulations end up being, in order to protect that landscape feature of cultural significance, it could have essentially millions, if not more, dollars of impact on those property owners. We just don't know because the rule doesn't, and I don't want the rule to do this, but the rule doesn't specify what the potential regulatory impacts are of a Goal 5 overlay on that.
Right, Dave, thank you. It is hard to anticipate that cost, but you're saying right now the way it's phrased doesn't adequately recognize that. And if Amanda could just respond, and then we'll get over to Kimberly. Dave, thank you for that kind of info on Measure 56 notice for folks. I think that usually it's when there's a legislative change, right? And Gordon, Gordon and then Amanda.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. This is Gordon Howard, Community Service Division Manager. Thank you, Dave, for bringing that up. That's an interesting point that whether the, addition of the landscape areas constitutes essentially a diminution of the ability to put, things on property that requires a Measure 56 notice. We'll take a look at that, definitely. I think it's an interesting question. It's a serious question that we need to resolve.
Thanks, good. And then Amanda?
So I'm wondering, Dave, what you think about the fact that these areas once, let's say nominated, right? So they're brought forward as a significant landscape area, and the way protection would be achieved for those would go through an EC analysis, and the EC analysis would capture some of the concerns you're raising, and the what spits out the end would have to be a balance. I'm just wondering if you think that mitigates at all your concern.
It doesn't really, Amanda, because, there's an EC analysis performed by pick your county, Josephine County, versus an EC analysis performed by Multnomah County, or Benton or whatever. I mean, there are each county has a particular reputation for how they're going to handle their Goal 5 inventory, and again, if they decide that houses in rural residential zones that are within this cultural or this landscape feature of cultural interest are no longer going to be allowed because they conflict with the goal, with the need to protect the landscape feature, that's significantly impactful.
Thank you both. Kimberly?
I think my question may have changed. I have a question based upon this discussion, but let me just start with where I was beginning. And I guess my questions are really about how Section 9, the applicability, relates to the fiscal impact statement. And so I think Dave kind of touched on it a little bit, but my perspective, I guess, is my question, again, because my perspective is from that of local government regulator, is regarding the language at the front end of that. It looks like it was amended to add the language about the UGB, but the beginning where it's basically optional for governments to adopt, to update their comprehensive plan or land use regulations. I mean, I remember reading that, and I talked it over with our staff here and our staff attorney. And I mean, for Salem, we're pretty well set up. It's more the question of looking at other jurisdictions. And my guess would be if folks read that at a local jurisdiction level and they don't already are overburdened with a lot of unfunded mandates, I guess I just don't. The fiscal impact is negligible if a decision is made by that local jurisdiction. Well, I'm not going to spend money on this because I don't have to do it. So I'm just, it's more, I don't know if you've discussed this already. I know there's not a lot of time today, but I'm just simply expressing my concern about that direction. And if I had my druthers, that would be taken out altogether. And then we would be working on how to help empower local jurisdictions to implement it and manage the costs.
Right.
I don't know.
Kimberly, we should go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to nip on your heels.
That's all. That's all I really have. I mean, I understand the challenges that Dave was bringing up. I'm just concerned about the fact that that statement is there in Section 9.
Sure. And Kimberly, we should come back to that and maybe touch on that now, because I think you might be reading it, and we may have written it in a way that it could be read differently than we intend, because the previous sections aren't voluntary. It means that, but I think what that's meant to say is a city or county, because we're not coming with a giant package of resources for cities and counties to be able to update their plans. That, you know, Amanda, if the agency was careful to write the rules as they would apply directly to local governments rather than having the local government need to go out and inventory proactively. So it's the quasi judicial actions and then the landscape feature of cultural significance would come up with development applications rather than a global proactive new comp plan section, if you will. Amanda, do you want to clarify anything? I'm attempting to stay there if you know what I'm trying to get at.
Yes, I think thanks, Kirsten. I think we need to separate, make sure we're talking about which one we're talking about, whether archaeological sites or landscape areas, right? So with landscape areas, well, I guess even with landscape areas, a local government can advise, but they will not be able to require anything with regard to landscape areas until a significant landscape area is listed on their local inventory. And there's two pathways that kind of force that consideration of a landscape, of a potentially significant landscape area. One being at the time of UGB expansion, someone comes forward and says, hey, there's a significant landscape feature here. We believe it's a significant landscape feature. And then the local government would need to take that site through the Goal 5 process as part of that UGB expansion. The other time that would force a local government to apply the Goal 5 process to a potentially significant landscape area is if somebody comes with and applies for a plan amendment, and they would pay for the process, the cost for that plan amendment, and the local government would bring that through the Goal 5 process, and it would come out the other side with either a decision that it's significant or not significant, and if significant, what the protection measures would be. So that's for landscape areas. And I could go on about archaeological sites, but I think right now we're talking more about the landscape area. Although with Kimberly, yes, with what applies directly, that the stuff that applies directly is also regarding archaeological sites, which is kind of this rule would help to shed light and elevate existing laws and rules that already exist to address archaeological sites in the state.
So thanks, Vanessa. So we should probably be careful with Goal 9, for example, with Section 9 to kind of clarify. It doesn't mean that complying with the rule is voluntary. It just means that what a local government we're not saying local governments, you have to go and proactively amend your codes or comp plans. It's development driven or locally voluntary to do that. That makes sense, Kimberly?
Yeah, I think so, but maybe the language, if there's still time to clarify that, because I did not read it that way.
Right. That would cause me, yeah, I could see where someone just kind of reads it and they're like, oh, this whole program's voluntary. That's not the intent. It's that.
Yeah. Well, I feel better.
Yeah, for sure. So let's hear from Keenan and then John. Thanks, Amanda. Keenan, please, sir.
Sure. So I guess we've kind of a little bit moved away from my initial comment, but I shared Dave's concerns about the landscape area language kind of just in general. I think he articulated it very well. I don't really have a lot more to add. I just wanted to add my perspective on this as well.
And is it like one-to-one, Keenan? I mean, I remember from your application to this group that you worked quite a bit with Goal 5 and also represent property owners and developers from time to time. Is it the uncertainty that's of concern to you? And I wouldn't blame you. This is not a judgment, but I'm just trying to get, the more we can understand about your concern, the better.
Yeah, I mean, as an applicant's attorney, my clients are developers. And so similar to Dave's considerations, I'm concerned about generally the impact of that on site-specific projects. I understand there's a process to go through for designation of these areas. Respectfully, that doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence, but ultimately that's, that is what it is.
That's right, for sure, Keenan. And it's we understand. I mean, it's I understand. Trying to figure out the balance of,
I wish I had a better solution to this,
Right,
but
I
yeah,
know.
just wanted
It's
to kind
not-
of put
if
it
it
on the
were-
record here.
thank you, Keenan. If it were easy, none of us would be here. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. John.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Keenan. I almost forgot why I raised my hand too, but he brought me back around to it. I just want to say, like, at the very beginning of all of this, when we were first before the RAC, there were some discussions about, can we make this work like the National Historic Preservation Act and Section 106, and we've tried to the extent we can, but I just wanted to point out that as a comparison, maybe to make some folks feel a little better about it, the National Historic Preservation Act is signed in 1966, and I think in the state of Washington since then there's been one project that has been stopped because of it, and I think in Oregon there has been one that has been stopped because of it, and that includes landscape areas, and other things. So it's always been a process in that, and I don't know, I'm not looking at the language right now in that impact statement, but I'm just trying to say that, I think we could, the idea is like, well, if there's something there, can we avoid it? Can we minimize the impact to it? And then if those don't work, can we mitigate for it? I don't know that we have all those options, given the tools that we have to work with, but I just wanted to mention that these things aren't intended to shut stuff down. It's intended to be to recognize places and then try to do something to the effect that we're going to try to not unnecessarily impact them if we don't have to.
Is continuing to evolve the relatively modern land use planning program in Oregon. It's still new, and we're still learning how to do it well, and with respect to all Oregonians. So thanks, John. Dave, it's back to you, sir.
I'll be short and then shut up for a while. The only thing that Amanda said that made me worry, and it's a very, very logical example. We have a city that tries to expand its boundary because House Bill 2001's assigned them housing production targets that they can't meet with the existing residential capacity that they have in their cities. And of course, the neighbors, the neighborhood groups don't want the city to expand. And so all of a sudden, the area that the city needs to expand, that's been identified either as an urban reserve area or under the priority system that we've established for boundary expansion areas, is the identified area to expand the boundary. And now all of a sudden, the county, before the city can even act, the county is required to do a Goal 5 inventory update because somebody comes in and says this is a landscape feature of cultural interest. And I guarantee you, with how aggressive people have become recently on fighting UGB expansions, this will just be another quiver in the toolbox, or another arrow, I should say, in the quiver of the folks that are trying to stop boundary expansions. I mean, I don't know what we can do about it either. Maybe it's a tighter definition of landscape feature of cultural interest, but it just has some real potential for broad implications and being used in ways that are not intended by anybody on this rack.
Right, that's basically we have a acronym in our field, which is, they have so many acronyms, but one being not in my backyard, or NIMBY, folks that just don't want to see more development, Dave. And I think that's, a legitimate concern. One of the guiding operating principles of this rulemaking is, committed to by the department, and affirmed by the commission, is, respecting for our housing production goals. So we know that it's like, how can we do both, respectfully to the resources for all, and, maintain flexibility for property owners where there might be a landscape feature. I think one of the lessons I've taken from Gordon, is from the Goal 5 solar on farmland rulemaking out in Eastern Oregon right now. And Councilmember Anderson isn't in the room today. I think he had a conflict, but he was the advocate. Gordon is represented by you to me, which is, let's have a discussion, so it's more to, call in the discussion, not to say, I think everyone on the RAC knows it's not a one size fits all approach, but how do we have a discussion about a resource that hasn't heretofore had an avenue in the statewide land use planning process?
Yeah, I just want to say, this is Gordon Howard again, that in terms of the fiscal impact statement and landscape features and potential UGB expansions, that in my opinion, is not a measure 56 issue, because the land doesn't have any existing rights as of yet that can be reduced. But that being said, it's still a significant policy issue, certainly, and could be used. I think you're correct, Dave, potentially to gum up the works in a UGB expansion situation for reasons that aren't necessarily related to cultural resources per se. So,
well, certainly this area of the fiscal impact statement, you're helping us identify the concerns. And I do see Keenan came back on, which is great. Nick, let's hear from you first, and then Keenan.
Okay, yeah. So I guess I thought I understood it. Now I don't think I do understand. So regarding the cultural landscapes of significance, just indulge me with an example. The city of Portland is doing an area plan. We look at a geography of 150 acres. We come up with new policies. We amend comp plan amendments. We amend the zoning code, blah, blah, blah. There's a legislative process. In that process, will we be required to inventory for cultural landscapes in that area? And if we do an ESE analysis, some are found to be important. We need to come up with a program to protect. Is that true? I'm trying to figure.
I think it's no. You asked a good question, Nick. So I think your question was clear. So I'm just going to kid. I think the answer is no. But I want to turn to Amanda. She's the
Elucidator.
Exactly. She's the official elucidator. Thank you.
I agree. The answer to your question, Nick, is no.
Okay. So okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. And the reason is, remember, the two occurrences where the landscape area of cultural significance is indicated in the rule is at the time of UTB expansion, which actually exists now. Y'all, we talked about this in, I think, our first meeting in division, is it 16? Is it division 16? 23, excuse me. There is a call in right now for anyone to mention any Goal 5 resource in a UGB expansion. So this just sort of clarifies it. It does exist now. And then the second occurrence would be a plan amendment that is kind of locally. Well, Amanda, do you want to clarify? Because your second example was a plan amendment and Nick was just describing a plan amendment. Yeah.
Right. The example that I use, or the analogy, is with aggregate sites. The way an aggregate site is added to an inventory now of locally significant aggregate sites is the landowner comes to the county, says we want to add this site to the inventory. It's evaluated for significance. If it's determined to be significant, then protection measures are determined. So that's what this rule is trying to say. So someone could come forward with a site. They would have to pay for the expense of running that plan amendment through the system, but it's still not an obligation of the local government to do a broader survey of landscape areas in a particular area. They just have to respond to information input during the a UGB expansion process and requests for a plan amendment that is brought by an applicant and paid for by the applicant.
And this rule provides a way for the local jurisdiction to do a plan amendment and to do an inventory, and at its discretion, do an inventory and adopt a program to protect.
True.
Yeah.
That's right. So that's in sections 4 and 6 that,
Yeah.
that you guys talked about. Great. Keenan, thanks for your patience, sir. Please.
Sure. So I mean, Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong on this, and I apologize, I missed the last meeting, so I'm kind of coming into this a little bit late. But would this rule apply during a post-adoption plan amendment that's applicant initiated? I think it does, correct?
A post-acknowledgement plan amendment that's applicant initiative for specifically having a site reviewed for significance and protected through goal 5, not any PAPA that comes through, just
So
one.
yeah. Sorry to apologize to cut you off there, but that's my concern is what Dave raised is if it's a pop-up for something that's unrelated to cultural resources, but someone comes out during that process and identifies a site to be looked at, it would not apply?
Not apply.
Okay. That's my question. Thank you.
Unless the PAPA is a UGB expansion, right?
Yes. Got it.
And Amanda, we're either in section 4 or section 6 if people want to be looking at that. I think right now we're in 4. It let the when it would apply.
The section about potentially significant
Yeah.
Landscape areas, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll be looking at that. Thanks. Yeah, no, important to clarify these. This is careful work. Well, thank you, everybody. That's the piece. If no one else has a comment on the fiscal impact statement, that is an important and a deep discussion. Obviously it's recorded. We'll be summarizing that and we'll be working more. I know our director is interested in amending the statement even before anyone came on this call today. So she felt that it really hadn't been quite adequately reflected there. So thank you. Okay, well, let's turn into, there was one more thing I might just point out in the non-required part of the fiscal impact statement is there's housing impact statement, of course, and please do review that and send us any additional comments by the 23rd. And there's the racial equity impact statement, and this is awkward, and I would definitely encourage any representative, one of the tribes on the call today, to chime in and help correct me, but I was told in no uncertain terms by the Governor Kotek's new Tribal Affairs Director, Director Shana Radford, that the tribes are not a race; it's a political construct, and yet the census does call in Native American, Native Hawaiian, Native Alaskan communities in its race and ethnicity category. So I think that we kind of hold both as true, that that is not perfect language anywhere. But the impact statement on page 14 concludes that the rule changes would be expected to promote racial equity and equitable outcomes through increased consideration and incorporation of Native American input into land use. In addition, the rule is designed to clarify and expand cultural resource recognition and local protection for resource sites that most likely to have a disproportionate beneficial impact on Native Americans, but not only. Proposed rule represents a clarification of the treatment of significant cultural areas. The rule would at a minimum maintain status quo on racial equity with the potential to advance racial equity. So welcome anyone's comments on that. The racial equity impact statement is new in the state of Oregon for about the last 3 years. So there's barely any good guidance on this by the Department of Justice. And so these are still a work in progress. So we welcome comments on those as well. And I keep saying the 23rd, that's next Tuesday. Asking for RAC member comments on the rule or parts of them by next Tuesday, so we can work to get this over to legal counsel and our director for final review that first week in August. And then for Casaria, the last week in August, so she can work on filing the rule and getting it in the books for the hearings process. Very tightly knitted in here, as you all know, before the long legislative session, because we shall not be in rulemaking during legislative sessions. No agency takes that on just because everyone scatters to the wind, and it's hard to keep anyone's head straight during long legislative session. Very busy times. So, okay, well, let's turn to the rule. We've talked about some pieces of it today, and I certainly want to hear from Cassie because she made extensive comments. I know Amanda has reviewed them all, and there's probably either there's a reason why we didn't incorporate something, or we did just simply make an error of omission. So we want to talk through those. we recommended in our transmittal letter that we don't spend too much time on definitions, but instead talk about the defined terms as they occur in the rule. So with that, I would suggest that maybe we start on page 3, which is the second section, which is the relationship of this rule to other rules in the division. Is there any comments or concerns on section 2? And Amanda, if you would clarify, if you look section by section and see if there's, I know we had a number of areas where we were seeking the guidance of legal counsel, and Amanda was able to meet with counsel Steve Shipsey yesterday. So there might be areas where you have clarifications, Amanda, as we go through your conversations with Steve. Anything, Amanda? Section 2? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, since people did have a lot of comments on definitions, I don't want to spend a lot of time, but I will say we just made a decision to both reference numbers and include the language of the definitions, just to make it easier to read. And
Cassie, I think that was one of Cassie's comments as well. Yeah.
And then there's issue about submerged and submersible lands and the bed of the sea, because that's the definition of archaeological site. We are going to have our own definition of archaeological site, because only the state has jurisdiction over the bed of the sea. So we will have our own definition that does reference why, where the information comes from for our definition of archaeological site. I think that's the main 2 points there, and that was based on assistance from our legal counsel.
So I'm going to jump in just real quick and reiterate the concern that I have around not referencing the original definitions as of an archaeological site and of an archaeological object as they are in ORS 358.905. Creating a second definition in rule creates processual nightmare and can make archaeological compliance much more complicated and much more difficult. And I am incredibly concerned about creating a duplicate and potentially different definition from that rule in 905.
I don't believe that's our intent. So Amanda, could you clarify?
Well, I think we're going to follow the advice of our legal counsel, and actually, there's going to be another change probably too. We won't have a definition for archaeological object. We will have the term archaeological object within our definition of archaeological site. And when the word archaeological object is used, it'll say as defined in, and make that reference to the statutory definition. And I think, Cassie, the point is that our rule just works differently than the archaeological, our rule is just going to be different. What our authorities are different, how this all gets worked out and applied at local government level is going to be different. And so we just need to make sure that our rule does what it needs to do from the land use program perspective. And we've heard your comments and other people commenting about the referencing other definitions. And like I said, we will have the reference and also write it out. We know that could mean that we will have to amend the rule if some of these definitions are changed in the future. But we also don't want a rule that's filled with numbers that would be hard for somebody else to follow. So we've talked about it a lot internally, and that's the direction we're going right now, is to both reference the existing rules, whether it be in statute or somebody else's rule or both, and write them out so the reader of this rule doesn't have to jump to other chapters of the OAR or to statute to figure out what the rule's trying to say.
Cassie, do you want to share like an example in the rule document, and if I could have John just respond while Cassie, you look up an example, because I certainly understand the concern about there being any light between SHPO's rules and our rules, and that's not the intent, right? We follow SHPO's lead here, so that's certainly not the intent. So I think we just need to keep working at it so that they mirror each other as closely as possible whenever possible.
Yeah, I think it's important that it references the rule in statute, because as we all know, rule cannot change what's in statute. And so I really need to highlight that. But I think John wanted to kind of reply or provide some additional
You
context.
just said what I wanted to say. So we can't change a statute with a rule, so.
Yeah. So I just worry that this could be mistaken for creating something different. And so I want to make sure that that is very clear. And I think that's why it's important to reference the rule and statute.
Definitely.
This
Cassie,
I
draft
don't want to
rule-
jump
we're
in
trying to
front
do
of-
that, yeah. Go ahead,
I don't
Jeff.
want to jump in front of Nicholas because his hand's up, but I did want to just piggyback on it. That's not my opinion, but that's something that has been referenced at the DOJ's public law conference that they put on every couple of years. So that's where I'm getting that information from.
Right, no, that's definitely commonly understood, John. We don't have the authority. We're not the legislature. And Cassie, thanks. It's definitely the numeric citations as well as as plain language as description as we can is the intent. And I think Amanda was going to mention that does mean that if the rule changes, we will have to do conforming rulemaking to make sure that our rules are one-to-one.
Statute change.
If there are statute changes as well, we would also need to conform our rules. Yeah, thank you. That's from Gordon there. Nick.
Yeah, if we're done with definitions, I have a question regarding section 2. Is it appropriate?
Yes, please. Thank you. Thanks for your patience. Yep.
Yeah, so regarding 2C and related to confidentiality, and I believe this relates to stuff that's in section 5 regarding putting information about an archaeological resource into the record. And I guess I'm not a current planner, so current planners who are on here as well as John, I'm just curious about how you enter something into the public record for a land use decision that talks about mitigation or whatever, but somehow it's kept confidential. Like I'm concerned about how that might work. And we don't have to spend a lot of time on that here. And I don't have a specific objection, but I just wonder if it's going to be sort of a sticking point.
Ask for clarification first before we get responses as you've requested. Were you talking specifically about archaeological sites, or are you talking about landscape areas as well?
Well, I get specifically archaeological sites.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sean, do you have anything to share here about SHPO procedures? Because we'd certainly be following your lead.
Well, there's 2 things I was going to say. So, yeah, I only know about this from SHPO's perspective, but there is an exemption from public disclosure of archaeological site locations in statute. So I was gonna mention that, and that's where that's coming from. But I was also then going to, and I just saw her turn her camera on. I was gonna kind of throw the ball over to Kimberly, because I know that she's had to deal with this from city planning and all of that already. So not to put you on the spot, but I think you were going to jump in anyway.
I don't want to jump in front of Jill.
Please go ahead, Kimberly. Yeah, no, please.
Oh, yeah. Hi. Yeah, that's a good question, Nick. So luckily, I was a city planner first, so I know exactly where you're coming from. I also am very aware of how important it is to redact the specific location information. So what we've done here at the city of Salem regarding how to manage this when there's a land use application is we have, well, I'm responsible for a GIS layer that only I can access. So we have information that way connected, and it's integrated into our land use and permit processes, but things that the public can see. I don't know if you were here when I shared, we have a way of sharing it where the specific location information is redacted. In staff reports, again, we redact the information that relates to sharing specific information about location. But of course, we do keep the information about the tax lot, the owner, all the things we would normally require for a land use application. So there's a way to do it. But I would say that if a city is going to implement this program, you would need to have a qualified archaeologist either on contractor record, or on your staff to help you with manage it.
But what about there's requirements in section 5 that talk about findings and conditions of approval. And so I don't know how you have a staff report that talks about, that makes findings and puts conditions of approval on a land use review without revealing where that is. We can move on.
No, it's a good question. It's very important.
Yeah. So I'm having a hard
I mean,
time.
I can, like, I just finished writing a decision just now, and you talk about it, the resource. So just like you would talk about a historic resource and above ground resource, you talk about how and we have local criteria, right? So I can't speak to using the criteria in this rule, but I can speak to using the criteria that we have. So you talk about your findings relating to the development is not adversely affecting the resource. So you don't have to necessarily describe that resource in your finding. You don't have to say where it is, but you can speak to how the development, which you can describe in great detail, is or is not impacting it. And then you can describe the conditions moving forward. Like a common condition I will add is the inadvertent discovery plan, or a monitoring plan, or that kind of thing, or notification, depending on the comments I get back from the tribes. So I know it's hard to wrap your head around it, but it's using the same general processes and language you use for above ground historic design review, but just changing your resource and being more general.
Thank you, Kimberly, and good to see Jill. And I think Amanda may have had a response, and we'll get to Jill. Amanda, please.
Two things. One, the statute exempts information on archaeological sites from public records requests. It is not illegal to share information, which is why it's important for this rule to kind of add direction for how to appropriately handle that information. And the other thing I want to say is that sharing information about an archaeological site on somebody's own property is that's not public disclosure. I think, John, you told me that if you're giving somebody information about something that's on their property, that shouldn't be put in the same bucket as disclosing the information publicly.
Yeah, and we've addressed that at SHPO for the main reason is just that people need to know it's there, so that we hope that they can be a good steward and take care of it if they can, and then we'll help them if they're not able to. If they wanted to put a swimming pool in or something like that, we would help them with what the next steps would be with that. So
Thank you. Jill, please, just coming over.
I was just going to suggest what Amanda suggested, that we put some sort of key elements into the process that explains how you handle them, because we have ran into this, like if there's, what if somebody disputes that that's really, where the resource is actually located, how do you deal with that? And I know it's been a struggle. I've always had Cassie's help with like redactions and stuff to make sure that we're not providing any information out there, but I think I'm probably lucky and not everybody has that, so.
Thank you, everyone, for that. And I still am sort of grokking this, like if a land use decision's appealed and the information isn't actually in the record that you need, I wonder how it'll work. But anyway, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, these are good questions and good advances. Yeah, thank you. Please, Amanda.
I think I'm sharing the correct screen. I just want to point out that in the rule, there is some guidance for ways of providing information but yet also obscuring it. So that this is
you're on page 4.
Section 3C, big capital B.
Capital D. section
one.
3C. Capital D. I wonder if that's new since
Capital,
the,
capital B.
capital B is
Am I
employee.
sharing the screen? The one?
You are. You're totally
Okay.
sharing.
Okay.
It's just a long way away, man.
Yeah. Are you saying capital D is in dog?
E as in boy.
B is in boy. My trifocals are failing me here. It's the section where it says in the acquisition and publishing of data.
Mhm.
Oh, right. Okay. B is in boy. Found it. Sorry. Small C, big B. Thank you. Yep, Dave. Sorry, please. Thank you.
Thanks, and I hate to go back and ask a question that following the question Nick asked, but I'm kind of confused now too. And Amanda, I just want to make sure I understand because my worry about this may go down significantly. But am I correct in assuming that the choice to even do the cultural resources inventory rests exclusively with the local government and the department? Can't require a county to do that or a city?
A comprehensive inventory or even an inventory for a section of their jurisdiction, the answer is yes. But there are two
That they can't.
actions.
So the answer is it was an affirming the negative. Yeah.
Affirming the negative.
Yeah.
So, but there are two actions that could result in a jurisdiction creating an inventory of landscape areas when they didn't decide to do it, when the planning commission and city or county commissioners didn't decide to do it. And those two are when a site is raised during the time of UGB amendment, and that has to be brought through the process. And the other is if somebody brings up a plan amendment specifically to add a site to the local inventory, and that has to be brought through the process. Both of those are only landscape areas. This rule actually does not result in local, can I say absolutely? I almost want to say absolutely. It won't result in new local requirements for archaeological sites. Actually, there's only one time when it does, and that's some an amendment that was made. So if we start moving through this more systematically, we'll get there. But everything is recommendations for how to avoid the site or how to comply, how to contact SHPO, or how to obtain a permit if the site is not going to be avoided. There's only one exception, which is if there is a site on Aura. So if the local government is given information, there is a site on Aura that already has a boundary around that archaeological site, and the development is going to occur within that boundary, and there'll be ground disturbance, then this rule now says that the applicant would need to either get a permit from SHPO or a letter saying that permit's not required.
Yeah, great. I appreciate that. And the other thing that I understand about goal 5, and I remember I believe we had to fight pretty hard for this 26 years ago, was language that enabled the local government, even after a finding that a site was significant, to determine on its own accord whether to protect, not protect, or do some kind of hybrid for a significant site. Is that the case with these rules?
Again, we're only talking about landscape areas. And yes, so that would be the fallout from an ESEE analysis.
Right.
And, in truth, a decision to fully allow conflicting uses is not protecting a site. So there's a slightly higher bar to reach that decision. But a limit decision, to limit a use, like you only allow things of a certain color or a certain height, let's say, those kind of limits are a form of Goal 5 protection.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you both. Yeah, very nuanced and very, very not in general knowledge among planners, this aspect of goal 5. It's very specific. So Dave, thank you for everyone. Thank you for your clarifying questions. Very easy and it's helpful for us to kind of pull out from these discussions some of the frequently asked questions cases. This is not a mandatory, like, all local governments shall update their goal 5 inventories for cultural areas. We just don't have the resources to credibly require that. Please, yes, Commissioner Thompson has a question. Yeah, please, absolutely.
Okay, this is a fascinating discussion for me because I think about the neighborhood that I live in. And I think about some of my neighbors, and they are eager to tell other neighbors what they're allowed or not to do on their property. Could an interested neighbor say about somebody else's property, oh, that has to be investigated and inventoried to see if it qualifies as a restricted area because there might be cultural artifacts or it might be a cultural area? Would that be allowed under these rules?
So I think it says now, look, notice goes out to tribes, but anybody during a public process can submit information into the record.
But that's
I
in the
think-
case of a development application, forgive me, Amanda, but
Yeah.
so one couldn't just say, hey, on a random Tuesday, I'm gonna call the city or the county and say, I think there's cultural resources on my neighbor's property,
That's the question,
and you should stop them from building their fourplex.
right?
No, then they call John Pauley.
Gets a lot of calls.
Okay.
John, yeah.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, we do get calls like that, and sometimes they're bogus, sometimes they are accurate. And it's difficult to tell which is which. I also know that when neighbors try to, squeal on other neighbors for damaging archaeological sites, my job is to notify state police if there's a possible statute violation, but it's difficult for them to get a warrant if, for example, we don't know already that there's an archaeological site there or things like that. So it is a complicated thing, but I would caution against it. And darn it, now we do have more of a SHPO impact statement here, because I was just thinking now everybody's going to call me. So so I'm going to have to do a lot of redaction on this document now. I think I'm kidding, but it does happen. So people are people, and sometimes they're truthful, and sometimes it's fabricated because they don't like their neighbor, don't like the project that's happening or something like that.
Sure.
Thank you. That's the world I live in too.
Yeah, thank you both. The practical effects are very important to consider.
Humanity.
Right, that's right. All right, Amanda, please, if you want to just continue to take us through, and Cassie, as we go along, Nick, others, if you've had questions that you've submitted and you expected to see a response, and you don't see any, please bring it up, because this is the time to talk about it. Please, Amanda. Anything else? We called for questions on section 2. If there's nothing else on section 2, I would say we go ahead and go into section 3, which is the state inventory of archaeological sites. Do we have anything new from Steve, Amanda? Oh, sorry, Cassie, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's a little bit hard for me to provide comment on the written comments that I provided, because the way I provided it in your survey, I didn't get a copy of my responses. And so
they should be in the so Cassie, they are in.
Are they in the packet that we sent?
Yep,
Okay.
they are. But I don't want to make you go look, but they should be in the actually, now I think that we posted them to the website, so I'll put that. I'll just simply email it to you now, but they're posted to not to make it a super long packet, because there's about 20 pages. It's on our website, so I'll just send you a link real quick.
That's why I didn't see him. I was like, I didn't see him in the packet, but
That's right. They're sort of in the adjunct. They're in the, not to make the. I'm trying to get everyone to read the packet, but the extra materials are on the website.
But it's 27 pages, Cassie.
It's okay. She'll find hers.
Okay.
Yeah.
well, I might not find him as we're getting to it, but that's all right. Go ahead.
Yeah. But we can certainly always come back. So Amanda, anything new in section 3 from Steve?
From Steve specifically?
Where we had like questions from legal counsel.
Yeah, he recommends, there was a question about how this sentence was worded that's basically stating what already exists in law. this rule can't contradict anything in statute. He just suggests taking out the sentence completely, because if you have it anywhere, it in the rule or in any rule, it implies that it's not true for other sections of this rule or other rules. So we're just gonna strike this sentence there. And that's specific to Steve. I think that was the only one here in section 3, but I wanted to say that another things we addressed here was it was a concern that the way the rule was written is it sounded like local governments had to go out and get information from the state database or information on archaeological sites. And the point here is that local governments are only responding to information that they receive, either as a result of notice to tribes or participation by somebody during the public comment period. And then, so we do have sites on Aura. I don't, and I'm going to say that not all sites on Aura are known to be significant sites, and John, correct me if I'm wrong about that. And in the end, because we're using sites that are recognized as significant sites in Aura as a goal 5 significant site, we have to explain that archaeology is complicated, right? And you don't necessarily know the nature of a site or the extent of a site until significant work has been done to explore the situation. So local government will receive information on sites. They will respond to that information if it's, I guess, I don't know, let's assume it's credible. And then the sites will be assumed to be or treated as significant until the site is evaluated by a professional archaeologist, which may or may not happen, right? The only time that would need to happen is if it looked like the site was going to be altered by the proposed development. If information is known that there is a site there, or there's a high likelihood of a site there, and the applicant or the developer, property owner does what they can to avoid digging in particular areas or avoid altering the site, then that's cool, right? That's what we want. But if it gets to the point of some disturbance, then really that all happens through the SHPO process. It's not something that happens through this rule, but this rule does explain that any site's going to be treated as significant unless it's been evaluated and it's been found to be not significant under the current statute for what it means to be a significant archaeological site.
Okay, a couple of hands up, you guys. Sorry, I was searching for Cassie. Cassie, I grabbed the link from the transmittal email because I was having trouble finding it on our website, but I'm going to send that to you right now. Sorry. So I don't know if John was first or Nick was first.
Go ahead, Nick.
Okay, I was going to bring this up in another section, but it's actually seems like it's more relevant perhaps here. You were just, Amanda, you were just talking about for sites listed in Aura sub B towards the top there, saying that you're not required, local governments don't have to go through OAR, blah, 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 but instead use this rule to protect. And I know you guys, these were in my written comments, but I just wanted to raise it for everyone here. What the implications are for that statement and perhaps other parts of this rule where jurisdictions have what might be actually more extensive protections for sites that are significant and listed in Aura. This says you have to follow these rules, but we have, like, local jurisdictions might have a bunch of other rules that apply. So does this trump the local rules? Do we have to follow both rules? I just want to make sure the rules allow for not only the local option under tribal government to government option that's being spelled out, but existing zoning based resource protection measures.
Right. And thanks, Nick. We are going to have to address that issue of how to recognize existing programs. And with and let's wait till we get to 5 on that, because I think that is the
Okay.
place where we're going to talk about that.
Okay, thanks.
Or whichever section is about the optional local programs.
At 9, section 8, excuse me, section.
So for some reason, normally this doesn't happen, but I'm not seeing hands raised. Maybe if I
Oh,
go
sorry,
to a
it's John's
different view.
next. Yeah, John's next. Sorry.
Okay, I know.
Yeah, I do have something to say. First, I've just quick, boring announcements. My sister-in-law is going to be showing up here in the next half hour or so, so I might have to pop away to let her in. And then I have to take my son to piano lessons, and I might have to switch to the phone if this is still going on at that time. So
Thank you.
you might.
Is that
I
is
might
that at
drop
5,
out
John?
for a little- What? Yeah, yeah.
Please switch to
I
the
don't-
phone. Well, thank you. Safety
Yeah.
first, but thank you for staying with us if you can.
Yeah, sister-in-law can be anytime. But I think Amanda said that on Aura we only keep significant archaeological sites. That's not true. We keep all the archaeological
I thought,
sites.
yeah.
And I would also point out that yes, the statute defines an archaeological site of significance, but the violation doesn't mention anything about site of archaeological significance. It says a person may not excavate, injure, destroy, or alter an archaeological site or object, or remove an archaeological object located on public or private lands in Oregon unless that activity is authorized by a permit issued under the permit statute. So I wanted to mention that. I'm losing my, oh well, I'll find you guys. I can't see oh well, oh there we go. Okay, so this is one of those weird things that we have to deal with our statutes at SHPO, and so this requires us to kind of have to read between the lines a little bit. We don't have a rule for that statute, although one is needed. And I always do the comparison with the federal process. Federal process is you've got any sort of project anywhere. You identify the area of that project, and then you inventory for anything that is eligible to the National Register in there. You go in, you find stuff, you apply the National Register criteria, anything that's in there that the National Register criteria touch. The next thing you do is you go, well, are the qualities that make that, whatever it is, building, archaeological site, whatever, eligible to the National Register, going to be adversely affected from the project to the point that it may not be eligible anymore. So that's kind of how that all works. And for the record, SHPOs are created through that National Historic Preservation Act law. That's why we exist. But because every state and territory has one, then they also like to assign us with the statutes. So for us, we do look at, whether or not these are archaeological sites are eligible. And if one is not eligible, then we're not going to really have a concern with the project going forward if those National Register criteria have been applied. And we know, everybody agrees that it's not eligible, but it's just a little bit more of a sticky wicket on the state side because it doesn't really say that. It just says a permit's always required. I would argue that a permit will probably be needed anyway for that process of determining significance. So the permit will already be there from the archaeologist. And then if it's decided that it's not a significant site, the project could probably continue without any further issue. But if it is eligible, then we'd have to look at a way to, address that. So it's a little complicated. And I hate to keep bringing up the federal law and the state law, but it's just, I know this is being recorded, so sorry to people from, the near future who might see this, but it does kind of drive us a little bit crazy at SHPO, or at least me, where we have one law that clearly walks us through a process, and then we have state laws that just say, don't do this. And so I think we can kind of make it fit here in this rule, because we're already trying to develop some type of a process. But the the reliance on like significant archaeological site, I think that that's okay for a point, but we're still going to have to deal with permits for any archaeological site, and then we're going to have to try and figure out what the status of them is. And I will finish with just saying that the status in Aura of all the archaeological sites that have been entered over the years is the current status. So if it says it's eligible already, that's what it is. If it says not eligible, that's what it is. And a lot of them, probably the vast majority, will say unevaluated, which means that nobody's ever applied the National Register criteria towards them. I'll stop. Go ahead, Amanda.
I was just going to say all of that is why this rule hands off that responsibility of applying the state laws and rules for archaeological sites to SHPO. So what this rule does is it encourages avoidance if there is awareness of the site. It helps spread more information about those rules, but it does not add any additional local requirements. It just would pass if the site's going to be disturbed or might be disturbed, that all gets passed right over to SHPO for you guys to do the work that you do.
Good, and after section 3, I'm gonna have to ask for a short break. Very short, but let's get through. I thought we should probably take a break by 4:45, but I'm not sure I'm gonna make it that long, so.
I think we're done. At least I'm done with what I needed to bring up. Let's see, what
Cassie
was
has-
the,
I just
is
have,
that-
yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
just had
Cassie.
one more comment. Under this B3 here, right above section D, in the acquisition and publishing of data exempt from disclosure, acquire and keep confidential information used to inform permit conditions. I remain concerned and would like to talk a little bit about how do we ensure that staff from local jurisdictions aren't basing information off of something that they previously received that they're not qualified to make. So, like, for example, they don't know that the site polygon that they received is not a well-defined polygon. And just because the site polygon that they received is outside of this project boundary, but it's maybe just touching on the project boundary, they might assume that it's not there, but because they haven't done an assessment or somebody hasn't done an assessment to see if that project boundary is appropriate, they're assuming that for one project it didn't have an effect, but I don't know if I'm making sense. How do we make sure that people aren't looking at this and saying, okay, it didn't have an effect on this project, I will assume no effect on this one as well, without making sure that there is a due diligence process to reevaluate that information for every new project.
So my thought there is that if that information is coming in response to a notice given to a tribe about a proposed project, then the tribe is welcome to not just provide a polygon, explain what the concern is, and then the local government responds to that concern, again, by either emphasizing avoidance and caution emphasizing the laws that apply if a site is if an archaeological object or site is disturbed.
Did that quite get at your question though, Cassie? Because I was hearing something a little different, which is so I don't know if it's in guidance or rule, Cassie, but I could see your point. Like, for sure we could put that in guidance, but it's stronger if it's in rule, which is a local government shall, consider archaeological information uniquely for every development application.
Yeah, that's really what I'm getting at there, Kristen. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm kind of wondering why that isn't the case already, because
I think it's just stating the obvious though. I mean, stating the best practice. Go ahead, Amanda, sorry.
Because the notice is unique to a proposed development and the information in reply to that notice is unique to that development.
Yeah, I get, maybe the answer is because there is something in here that says you have to send one for everything and that maybe just takes care of it. I just was reading this as a discrete piece saying, here's a hiccup that I could foresee being a
Concern, yeah.
problem. So,
Okay.
Right, I would watch though as this progresses, because if the notice requirements lessen, then the danger increases, I think, Cassie, you know, so yeah, right now it has the broad notice requirement. If that diminishes, then I think that your concern would, you know, be even more warranted. Okay, anything else on section 3? Well, if not, is it okay we take sort of just a 5-7 minute break and come back at 4:30 and take up section 4? Thanks. Nick says yes. Okay, we're doing it. Okay, you guys, thank you. We'll be right back at 4:30.
we had so much fun.
I know.
So here we go.
Hello, everybody. Come back. There's Amanda. Amanda, you are in the office. Yes, we don't go anywhere without Dave. It's Cassie.
What a great name.
Don't go anywhere without Cassie, Cassandra even better. Yeah, so section 4.
If we're ready to go, I can just say that really the only substantial change here was adding this sentence at the end of little a, that a tribal government shall be considered an authoritative source of knowledge on landscape features that are significant to their tribe's culture. And that was
Sorry,
a
can
way
you
of
share the
just,
screen?
excuse me?
We can't see what you're looking at.
Yeah, do you want to reshare, Amanda? Thank
So
you.
it's 4 sub A, and I will share my screen. Are you there? Okay. So this here, a tribal government shall be considered an authoritative source of knowledge on landscape features that are significant to their tribe's culture. And the other little edits are just small things.
Anyone else on that one? On section 5, section 4 rather,
Okay, I have one.
please.
There's a group in Clatsop County seeking recognition. They sought it, they had it, they lost it, they're seeking it again. I assume that it's voluntary on the part of the local government to listen to folks like that, but because they are not a recognized tribal government, and I don't, they have a
Mm,
governing system, but
yeah, I think that's a good point. Because sometimes we're specifically talking about federally recognized tribes. Maybe they should say federally recognized tribe, but we also, this rule does allow any tribe to come in as a culturally identified group to identify a site as potentially significant. This is only about the landscape areas of cultural significance. So maybe they should say federally recognized tribe, or maybe tribal government, maybe non-federally recognized tribes. I don't know. I'll flag that for sure. And the question is whether this statement should be broad to include any culturally identified group, or is it specific to a federally recognized tribe?
Mr. Honeycutt, please.
Thanks. So Amanda, somebody that lives in a rural area and doesn't want neighbors decides to come in and submit a post-acknowledgement plan amendment to declare basically everything around them as a landscape feature of cultural interest. And a letter comes in from a tribe that says that they concur. At that point, is the local government bound to declare that area significant and bound to apply some type of protections to protect that cultural site?
Well, in the standard process for identifying significance, all kinds of information can be brought into the discussion and considered. So this statement does try to put the thumb on the scale here specific to tribal governments, because we have witnessed tribes are not a race, but still I think there's racism involved. I mean, there's whatever it is that well, we've seen, I mean, I've been in meetings where tribes come and present very eloquently something that is very important to them, and other people can't hear that for whatever reason. They can't hear it. And so the idea of this sentence is to say, if a tribe knows it to be significant to them, then somebody else not in that tribe can say, oh no, you're just wrong. Like, why is it significant? It seems like a fair statement for me to have in the rule. But the question that you're raising is a little more broad, I think, because early on in this rulemaking, we talked about whether it was going to only be about tribal governments or federally recognized tribes, and there was interest. I didn't hear any other dissent, essentially, that all cultural groups should have access to having sites that are culturally significant addressed to this rule. We know that archaeological site is agnostic to what culture we're talking about. It's an archaeological site or it's not, right? But for these landscape areas of cultural significance, it is still a question out there. We don't have a good definition of what's a culturally identified group. So the door is pretty wide open for somebody to come in and say that if people have raised the issue of century farms, let's say, or I don't know, you can come up with a lot of examples of places that have been very important to people or a family or I don't know, a group of people that share a common ethnic heritage. So I don't know, Dave, this rule, like I said, it opens the door to people bringing things forward that we don't know about yet. And as far as the tribe, your example was some non-tribal entity comes in and says something's important, and then the tribe comes in and says, yes, it's important. The tribe only has authority in this rule to say what's important to their own tribal culture, not to weigh in on somebody else's cultural interest.
And that's full stop, right? So but Dave, your question kind of seemed to me to be, then yes, it would go through the ESCE process, it would still have to be evaluated. Cassie has her hand up on this.
Remember, the ESCE only comes in after a site has been determined to be significant. So you first have the process to decide whether a site is significant or not. Then you have the ESCE process that decides what will be done about that.
Thank you. She keeps telling me that. Keep at it, Amanda. Thank you. Cassie, please.
Yeah, I would just, we've talked about this before. I would just point to, for questions like that, I would point to existing processes for guidance on how to identify those things. Traditional cultural properties are a good example of how not only tribes, but any cultural group can identify a culturally significant landscape. TCPs are not restricted to tribes. And the Bulletin 38 for the National Park System identifies what a cultural group is. And it says, you can't just come in and say, yes, this is a cultural area. This is a significant cultural place to me. There has to be a boundary. There has to be characteristics. There has to be integrity. There are things that have to fall into place to make it that. And so I would just point to that as kind of an example for guidance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very helpful. John.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that because I think that's a great example. National Register Bulletin 38. The people who make those claims also have to be able to demonstrate that the place is part of their traditional culture, and so it's not just a statement that I've never been to New York City. I can't say that Manhattan or Central Park is my traditional cultural property. But if I could show that, the cultural group that I belong to has been using that space for, 100 years for whatever reason, I might have a different argument to make.
Thank you. Dave and then Keenan.
Well, Amanda's point, I think, is well taken. A century farm, I can absolutely see that happening in North Plains, for example, with a century farm and somebody going out there and saying you can't expand your boundary onto this century farm because it's a significant cultural resource site. And unfortunately, as I think we all know, active opposition to boundary expansions is sort of a way of life in this state. And if we don't provide some narrowing of the scope of this, of what we're talking about here, this is going to be used by folks that that aren't really, that are using it for a reason other than actual concern about the protection of a culturally significant landscape feature. So I
Can I
would
jump-
suggest that
Points-
we really narrow this.
Points well taken. John, Commissioner, did you want to add? No, okay, yeah, sorry. Amanda, were you going to respond? And then we have Keenan, but go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing, that it's just an order of operation. I think the concern is still there, but identifying a goal 5, a potentially significant goal 5 site, does not change where urban growth boundary is expanded to, because the rules for expanding urban growth boundary don't take that into consideration. But once this boundary is expanded, then having a or having a goal 5 significant site could affect how development occurs in that area.
So we want to look at that section. That's a really important point, Amanda. The difference between a UGB expansion and the application of zoning, or the annexation.
Well, so the UGB rules for, are in Division 24, right? And so they're separate. The whole hierarchy of how a city determines what areas are brought into the UGB, how much area, what areas are priority, that's not in our Division 23 rule.
Certainly, no, yeah, so right, so this would be one of many factors, and that was noted in the fiscal as well.
Well, again, it won't affect, I mean, I guess there's a possibility of somebody making an argument that, like, utilities couldn't be extended to someplace to another buildable area because something was in the way, but we have not. I don't really see how that would come into play, especially because the site wouldn't even be determined to be significant until the UGB. It would be part of the UGB expansion decision. It wouldn't be a prior decision.
Dave, do you want to finish up on that?
Yeah, I was gonna let Dave go
Privacy
first. Go
Discussion,
ahead.
yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely will factor into the determination of whether the boundary will expand onto that site, because both the size and the location of the boundary expansion are completely dependent on the ability to develop a certain number of units. And so a city will calculate the units they need and the ability to construct those units. And if those units are hampered significantly or completely by a goal 5 overlay requirement, then that's absolutely going to factor into the calculation. And that's why this implicates not just goal 5, it implicates goal 10, it implicates goal 3, it implicates goal 4.
Certainly. No, we're aware. Yeah. Believe me, we're aware of that, Dave, but I think the idea is, providing an avenue for folks interested in landscape areas of cultural significance to participate in the process. It doesn't determine the outcome.
Well, there's a way to do that and get at the people that are well-intended without allowing this to be used by folks that are just trying to stop a boundary expansion and looking for a reason.
Right.
Mhm.
We do hear you, of course. I mean, Department of Land Conservation Development is responsible for helping local governments manage growth, not stop growth. So, your point's well taken. Amanda, and then Keenan, you've been patient. You must have gotten tired. Your arm was losing blood circulation, so you put it down. But if you still had something you wanted to say after Amanda, please go ahead.
I misspoke because I forgot, Dave, your scenario of somebody bringing a site to the county to get added to the county inventory in anticipation of a UGB expansion. So in that case, there could be an issue. Although once brought into the city, because of new zoning, the city could do a plan amendment. I don't, this is like a really good question. I don't think the city is necessarily bound to the protections that the county puts on a site. They're bound to the site being identified as significant, but they could open up a new Goal 5 process to balance what the protections might be on that site.
But also the point is, I mean, we are talking about resources, so if the point is protection, that doesn't negate the need for housing. It just identifies a resource, which is, you know, part of the planning process for all 19 goals. So I think, you know, the intent is to bring it, you know, into the planning process as a part of an important part of the conversation. Keenan, please.
Sure. I'll make this quick. I mean, I also share Dave's concerns both in terms of a front end application as well as back end when we're talking about, say, specific development after a boundary expansion. I hear your point about cities engaging in a separate Goal 5 process. My concern is kind of just who bears the cost of that and what the impact is on the ultimate end goal of whatever objective is being sought in that process. I think that we need, obviously, the whole goal here is to balance resource preservation and also the practical impact of the rule that we're developing. I think that there should be some narrowing here. I think that the suggestion that we include recognized or federally recognized tribes instead of just a tribal government is a good one. I also will note, and I'm just kind of looking at this holistically here, so I'm not undercutting my own argument, but it says that a tribal government shall be considered an authoritative source of knowledge on landscape features that are significant to the tribe's cultures, not the only authoritative source. So I think there is still some wiggle room for balancing here, hopefully. I'm just not sure how that's going to shake out in terms of practical application.
So you're saying keep and, don't change it to the.
Yes, definitely keep and, not the.
Right. And this would be federally recognized tribal governments.
Yep.
Yeah. Anything else in this section? And Dave, we wouldn't be complete without you on this rack, so thank you for expressing your concerns early. Grateful. It's hard to contemplate how to narrow without it being in the public, without it being, you know, in context. But thank you, and let's keep thinking. I assume you'll stay with us to and through the process. Please keep thinking, help us thinking about it. Okay, well, let's turn to if there's nothing else on section 4, everybody.
I'll say one more thing that if the tribes that are in the room and then the other tribes that weren't able to make it to the meeting today, additional information on or examples. I know we have some kind of generic examples of what landscape features of cultural significance might be, but I think the concerns that Keenan and Dave are raising are very important, and a good way to understand how the magnitude of the impact and the magnitude of that concern would have might be having a better idea of what kinds of things that tribes might be coming in and requesting consideration for in the land use process. So if we had some better idea of size and scope, and I know we can't necessarily get location right, you know, because I don't know, but if we had the more information we can get on what the tribes are thinking about that is important to preserve, then maybe the concerns about the conflict with achieving our other housing goals and development objectives that we have in the state's land use program, we'll understand that intersection better. And if we can understand that intersection better when we are at LCDC, I think it would be helpful for all of us.
So you guys, I will point, Cassie, if I may, I will point folks to the matrix of landscape areas that tribal representatives help us flesh out heading into rulemaking. It's on the main rulemaking page, and you know, I defer to Cassie, so I'll wrap around and come back after Cassie, whatever you have to say. Undoubtedly, You'll sit better.
Which she's gets.
She's just trying to have her dog, I think your dog wants to participate. Someone's dog. Cassie, go ahead, please, though. We lost her for a sec. I think it's dog related. Are you back? Hello?
Yes, it was dog related. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. We have nothing against your dog at all, though. So if they want to participate, we're definitely a family first organization around here.
Yeah, every time. Yeah, so I just wanted to provide some context. And I know that the tribes had provided that matrix, and that's a really great example. I just wanted to remind everybody here that there are so many different types of culturally significant landscape features of TCPs. It's not a one size fits all. We can provide a dozen examples, and there will be a dozen more that they're so different and so variable by tribe and by area and by resource and by so many other things that I think that's one of the reasons that it is a little bit sometimes hard to pin down. So I just wanted to put that out there, that it can be really hard to clarify that.
Right, for sure. If it was, like I said, if it was easy, we wouldn't be here. If there's an inventory, we wouldn't be here, so it is, we're feeling our way to a better future together. Keenan, did you have anything else? Is there anything? Did I already call on you after?
Yeah, you called on me.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
I mean, I just also want to, again, just reiterate that I'm very cognizant of the need to balance resource protection here. I share Dave's concerns in terms of the practical application of the rule, not based on, the tribes themselves, but on certain opposition groups that frankly have turned it into Oregon's state sport to oppose boundary expansion. So, yeah, I deal with this a lot, not as much as Dave, but, when you're actually on the ground here, that's really what I'm concerned about. That's my role here, is to make sure that this makes sense practically.
Certainly, thank you.
I'll get off my
Gabby.
soapbox.
Oh, no, that's fine. We bring it with you. Gabby, please, good to see you.
Hi. Just to kind of quickly echo what Cassie was saying about, even the specifics, the size, boundary, everything involving with TCPs or cultural properties. Sometimes tribes just will be, some of that is very special, like confidential to a different level, that they're just not going to be comfortable with sharing even that amount of detail. So again, it's not one size fits all, and there's a lot of other reasons that they may not be so forthcoming with that kind of detail. Because again, it's good to balance all that, but just another thing, and just echoing what Cassie was saying. Thank you.
Gabby, thank you. And that became clear to us as we were seeking the easy solutions. So beyond this 3 years ago, it's not easy given the history of what Indigenous people in Oregon have faced. And one can understand why confidentiality is essential. And but I think, also on the other, and the other perspective of not wanting these rules to be usurped or used or for the reasons they're not intended. We're listening very hard to that, and would share the concern, because they're for a specific reason, not for stopping development, which is a fundamental part of the statewide land use planning program. Any particular location that was nefarious, that wasn't authentically brought by culturally specific group, and specifically federally recognized tribes. Okay, so section 4. Anything, last call? And you remember the back and forth. So section 5, we're back to archaeological sites, the protection of. Any questions or comments here?
I'll jump
Cassie.
in.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I was looking at the other screen. Sorry, Cassie.
No worries. So I think the biggest thing that jumps out at me as I'm scanning through these, I remain concerned about the opening statement and the closing statement of this section. the closing statement in particular that says archaeological sites are already subject to state statutes that prohibit alteration of significant sites without a permit. In fact, state law says you can't alter any site without a permit. It doesn't say they have to be significant. So I remain concerned that this is providing incorrect or misleading information about the state statute for permit requirements. And I encourage us to be careful about that.
Right, close that gap. Yeah, thank you, Cassie. I know
That's-
Amanda's, she's squinting at it. So.
And yeah, this is what was in the version that you guys emailed out to me as I was reading it, because we hadn't scrolled down to it here. So it's
Right.
under E, there was a paragraph that said archaeological sites are blah blah. And,
Okay, so little e?
Well, also, let's start with the intro, right? So Cassie, your concern is that intro right under big 5.
yeah, and this honestly, this looks different than even what you guys emailed out to us to review that I'd made a bunch of comments on.
Hopefully
So
it's better. So hopefully it evolved in.
I thought I double checked that this was the version that was in the packet, but
I do see,
Yeah.
because I have the printed copy, Amanda, of the packet, and I do see the same blue at the top. Goal 5, protection for significant archaeological sites is achieved through application of state statutes and permit requirements governing local treatment of all archaeological sites and associated human remains and objects. So Cassie, that's meant to call in. the
Yeah, no,
existing
that's-
statute.
that's great. That is not what's in the version that got emailed to me.
Really?
So if
In
that's
the
what
packet?
it is,
let me
in the
check the
yes.
packet here.
Now let's just take a moment and check, because that would be annoying for
This
sure.
this is the packet.
Yeah, the
What's
packet
going on
that I
here?
have doesn't have, maybe I opened a different, my packet doesn't have track changes on it at all.
Oh, weird, Cassie. Sorry.
Well, it's lower down in the document.
it
There's
further
two sets
down?
of rules.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so maybe I've been commenting,
No.
maybe I've been reviewing the wrong.
No, I don't think you are, Cassie. Nick, what do you mean? Because
Well, if you just open the packet, there's a previous version of the rule, isn't there?
no. You guys, let me just share screen real quick. I'm gonna go online, because let's just get, it's helpful to make sure we're all on the exact same page. So let me just go there.
Yeah, it appears that there's 2 different versions in this packet.
Huh, okay, yikes. I believe you, so let me just get there.
What
I mean,
page are you on that has the other version of the rule? What page of the packet? Because it's a PDF, right?
The page of the packet would be 11 of 27. Or 11 or 12.
Oh, you know what's going on?
Mhm.
That is within the fiscal impact statement where he
yes.
copied stuff out of a previous
Yes.
version of the rule.
That's right. Thank
That's
you,
right.
Cassie. It's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. So in that, Cassie, I'm so sorry for the confusion. That is in the Johnson Economics Fiscal Impact Statement, and he was looking at a rule as of April 1. And so if you don't mind, let's look at the actual rule with the track changes piece.
Yeah, thank you. And
Section
Nick,
5 is on PDF page 24, Cassie.
Yeah, I found it. Thank you for pointing that out. I went through the whole thing. I was like, I don't see any of the changes. That explains.
Give a
lot
heart
of what I
attack.
was
Yeah, no,
confused
sorry.
about.
Sorry about that. I'm sure you had a, yeah. Oof,
You've
sorry.
been very kind considering you thought we ignored it.
No, I appreciate that. So then that may have addressed that.
Amanda, go ahead and reshare if you don't mind. Sorry about that.
I'm just going to scan it through. So I think that actually addressed my concern then, now that I'm reading this.
Take time. Yeah, we have.
There are some changes after, or say not of the intro statement though. I've got a couple changes in this section after talking with our attorney. But this first paragraph, not. So that's all still the same.
Yeah, but I think it addressed my concern though. So I think I will put my hand down and say, thank you.
Okay. It's okay, but you did have one further in on 5 too, Cassie. So if you have a minute there, just scroll and see if sub E is still, but of concern.
Oh yeah, I had what, like 8 comments on this section.
Right, yeah, no, we appreciate them. Nick, please, go ahead.
Yeah, so just a couple of quick things. first of all, like in section A, is land use authorization, is that defined anywhere?
That actually is a change, after talking to, our legal counsel. The suggestion, I'm just gonna move this over because these are the edits we made, yesterday. So all local applications forms for authorizations, and partly because, we know who we're speaking to. This is a speaking to the planning departments of local government, so we don't have to use other modifiers. So all local application forms for authorizations that involve ground disturbance is how it's worded now. And also there's actually some edits here because it used to say like expected, where ground disturbance is expected, and then it said when ground disturbance is expected when. And now what he suggested is okay, so all application forms for authorizations that involve ground disturbance, and then we jump down to here and say examples of ground disturbance include, and I have 4 examples, we can add more, but it's an open-ended list.
Okay,
And
so
that's
that's
a change from what you have in your packet.
okay, and so that would capture land use approval for a new house in a residential zone. Does authorization for a ground disturbance, does that capture like a public works permit for a new sewer line that doesn't involve, a land use review?
Right, this A is about sending information out. It doesn't have anything about
I
taking
understand.
information in, right?
No, I
So-
understand, but we
Yeah.
just our land use, our counter folks want to know, we need clarity about when we need to send those out. So it seems like it's gotten even more vague by striking out land use. There's just any authorization.
For ground disturbance.
So a
Would involve
plumbing,
ground disturbance.
yeah, so a commercial plumbing permit where, they're building a new water line from the street to the house.
And what would be a reason not to inform that person of,
No reason not to, just
Okay.
want to make local
Yeah.
jurisdictions just need to know is all.
Okay.
So we can move on, but
No, it's an important point, Nick, and it's related to
Yeah.
your point earlier. I mean, we're grateful for your close review of these and also workshopping them with your colleagues. So
yeah, and
this
and
is-
I'm real.
I think you also wanted to call in here that the amount of notice for tribes. So this might be the right place to actually, after we hear from Keenan, to hear from tribal representatives. We know the number, it's in the hundreds and possibly thousands of notices per year.
Well, that's
Kirsten?
B. That's B though, right?
right?
Yeah.
This A is just, what I love A. So the A was just, being clear about when we have to provide information, and I think we can work with when we provide that information and what that information says. I just wanted to posit that
Yeah.
we need some clarity about knowing when. B, I think is B. I mean, if other folks want to talk about A, I'll pause.
So
Yeah,
Nick,
thanks, Nick. Yeah, Amanda.
one of the things I think might be happening is different jurisdictions use different terms, right? So that's some of the comments I got, was that the term we were using before didn't fit with how the terms they use. So we need to find terms that are generic to all jurisdictions, and that might,
Okay.
wrap in maybe more than we were intending, but whatever help we can get to get this sentence appropriate would be very I'd be very thankful for that input.
And in consultation with tribes, right? So we're talking, GLCD is not, we don't represent tribes.
This
So we
one,
want to, yeah.
this
But
one
you're-
does not involve tribes, Kirsten. A.
You're saying at the counter, what makes sense? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Keenan, you were saying you were not commenting on A, right?
Correct.
And then Kimberly, did you have anything on A? Yeah, please, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, I'm sorry, I think I missed the last meeting and maybe you guys talked about it more in depth then, but I'm gonna say that in terms of the language here, I can tell you what we're doing here, and we've of course had some time to try certain things out and realize that what didn't work and what has been working. And I don't have a good recommendation for the precise words, but I can tell you that here we attach our statement essentially. So we make the assessment about what permits authorize ground disturbing activity. So that's like in our internal processes. And then we issue each permit that authorizes that ground disturbing activity has both an IDP and a statement about, you know, the law. So I don't know if that's the intent here. For publicly owned property, we also double check. We have different processes, and it requires a higher level of review before we even issue it. So I don't know.
No, that's helpful. Yeah, Kimberly, it's
Yeah.
helpful because we know that a program is needed to go along with this. We know that there's going to be, DLCD is, we only operate in partnership with local governments. And City of
Yeah.
Salem and City of Portland are known to be well-resourced as opposed to like City of Echo, Oregon, or, you know, Mount Vernon, you know, so we know that we would want to be looking at your models and providing technical assistance to local governments to update their procedures and their forms. And that's a bit of a road. So in terms of the applicability and timing of the rule, I do want to just share and call in the question of when these rules go into effect. Folks on the webinar did ask that. We haven't answered that. And normally they would go into effect quite immediately, you know, within a few weeks of filing a legislative notice. So it's something else we really appreciate RAC members thinking about is to do this well and to not, you know, expose our local government partners to risk for not having noticed correctly, you know, what time is needed to help get them there. Obviously, the rules could immediately say, we recommend that all local governments put this into effect immediately. And the reality is that many small and rural local governments in Oregon just don't have the resources unless we can assist. So just please, you know, as we're thinking about rules that, you know, and regs and what happens at the counter, the timing of just human uptake, we want to be thinking about that very carefully. So I want to again thank the League of Oregon Cities for helping us put on that webinar where that, you know, some of those concerns were raised. We're still in the process of responding to those concerns and questions in the webinar. It'll take a few weeks due to some vacation schedules, but we want to be getting those answers out publicly, and we'll be working on that with our director, and then I'm sure bringing it to commission as well, the September hearing. It's quite a little aria there. I'm sorry, but thank you. It's not lost on us that this is, you know, City of Portland, City of Salem have years of experience implementing this, you know, Coos Bay, you know, that other local governments don't have. Sorry. Thank you. Nick, is that a side hand?
Looks like applause.
Is it a little applause? Thank you. You
I
can never
don't know.
tell. I don't know if it was a backhand. He's like, get out of there. No, so
I would.
yeah, no, Nick, thank you. So I think we had Cassie. So let's excuse me, Keenan. Keenan, let's hear from you and then loop back around. Your point might be on a different part, but go ahead and let us know what's in your mind.
It's super quick here. I'm just gonna note in sub B and sub C, we're using federally recognized tribes.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's a reason for the distinction between that and the previous section we discussed, because again, I also wasn't here at the last meeting, but if there isn't, I think we should just make consistency through the rule on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's all.
Cassie and Kimberly, thank you for that. We love copies of everything. All your notices, all the guidances that you're using. Good. You're definitely a model. Nick and then Dave. How did I miss Cassie? I think it's Nick, Cassie, Dave. Yeah.
No, Cassie's before me. Go ahead.
Thank
Cassie.
you. Okay. Cassie.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute and I accidentally dropped my hand. So I wanted to go down to the next page. So if we're not ready to do that, I can hold my comment, but I have some comments starting on the list of edits which I
Good,
think.
good. Okay, let's just see if we're okay on, I mean, not okay, I mean, we're never, this is hard work. Yeah, good enough on A. Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah.
So on A, anything else on A, Nick, and then Dave?
B.
B. How about you, Dave?
I've got D, so.
You're
I'll-
down with
I'm
D.
last.
Okay, let's move along. Okay, so B is in boy.
Yeah, so is that me? So I have a better understanding, I think, now why we've chosen quasi-judicial as a triggering as an imperfect but triggering mechanism, because it has a timeline for notification and response. So I'm getting a little bit more comfortable with it, even though the nexus between a quasi-judicial land use review and an archaeological resource is not necessarily always going to be there. But first of all, I just want to make sure, is it accurate to read this for applications requiring quasi-judicial review that involve ground disturbance? It's not restated here because it's already been stated in A.
Amanda?
It's a good point, because it should be separate, so.
So I think that's really critical, because there are so many quasi-judicial reviews that do not involve ground disturbance. And so that would go a long way towards, I mean, it's still difficult because the planners are going to have to, make some determination there about who to notice and when to notice and when not. But it would significantly cut down on the volume of notices going to tribes, because there really is no ground disturbance risk.
Okay. Yeah, we can reorganize this, or reference in B this part in A, but that's a really good point. Thank you.
Okay. And then just related to B, some of our land use planners were wondering if this notification was based off wetland noticing practices, which they have found mandated by the state problematic, because it has to be done at a different time with a different form. And they're hoping that this could be interpreted as and executed as part of the regular notice that goes out at the beginning of a land use review, that goes to thousands of different partners and folks, rather than a second level of notification that comes later using something different.
Right.
So
yeah, and I have a couple things to say about that. So this idea of notifying tribes when the application came in was a way to tag on additional days. So this is this comment here. The intent was to provide all parties time prior to the 120 days for cities, 150 days for counties clock, to identify potential conflicts. But since then, people have raised concerns about this. I believe Cassie has said that it's not necessarily helpful to have an application that was not determined to be complete, because then there might not be enough information to comment on. So maybe today we can get a raise of hands to see whether we should abandon this concept of trying to tag on a few extra days, and just stick with this 120, 125 day clock for getting the information in. Tribes need time to respond, right? And then, but I think, yeah, that's it. So it's there's a trade-off here, what we're trying to do, and which is a better way to go about it.
Amanda, were you really trying to
Go ahead, Jill, sorry.
also include, like, if they came back and said there wasn't enough information, that could have included that in like our deemed incomplete letters? Is that kind of what?
Yes.
Yeah. So I can definitely see that point. I just worry about the opposite side too, like sending too much information when it's not complete at all. But I get your point, and I think I really appreciate the extra time when more information is needed to have that up front versus having it at the end.
well,
So
I guess I'm a
Jill-
little confused. As it's currently written, when when precisely in the process does the local jurisdiction require to send out the notice?
So I
To the
think it was
tribes.
written that when we received it, we would disperse it and request the information. And then if there wasn't enough information, then we can include that in our deemed incomplete letters and say, we require this additional information to be able to make this determination.
And I have a question about that point. And but I will say, a jurisdiction has 30 days to deem a application complete. So this 25 days gives a 5-day turnaround time to send out the notice, and then 25 days to get information back about that information, the application being complete. But here's a question I have. This isn't a complete application determined by criteria that are in the local code. Like, I don't know how this rule could change the criteria for what is a complete application.
It is, but if, for instance, you had to show like cut and fills or some sort of grading plan or something, and they were missing information that's crucial to be able to show compliance with this section, then that becomes something that they didn't comply with. Because you're supposed to be able to demonstrate that you have all the information for us to make an informed decision.
And that would be a determination that the city or county could make without assistance from the tribe then.
Yes, it is. If there's enough information here for us to say, these are the things you need to before you send comments, then yeah, it would be.
I think that isn't the point here that we are trying to say that the part of the application that would be in the completeness review, it's whether or not you notified tribes, not whether or not tribes responded.
No,
No.
because
We
we're not
can't
asking the applicant to know,
exact information from tribes just because we want it.
but we're not asking the applicant to notify tribes. We're asking
Right.
the city or county to notify tribes.
That's right. That's
So
right.
maybe I
So
didn't
that's the,
understand your point, your question or
well,
point.
that's the, I think that well, so it'd be, right, so it's either whether or not information was received, the applications on other merits would be complete. It doesn't stay incomplete because the tribe did not respond.
The notice doesn't have anything to do with completeness.
Yeah, the notice doesn't. We're saying if there wasn't enough information for us to make a determination that basically that they've complied with the criteria. So as I said, maybe they draw up a site plan to show us, like, we have I think our site plan says that, you know, you're supposed to identify like where you're putting your development, your roads, cuts, fills, stuff like that. But let's say we looked at the site plan and we missed it, and we send it to tribe, and the tribe comes back and says, you missed it. We've kind of lost that opportunity to gain that additional information. Like, it shortened that timeline.
Well, let's say the notice went to tribes after you deem the application complete and it wasn't complete. Wouldn't the applicant still need to provide information on their cut and fill, let's say, in order to get their final approval?
They may, but it doesn't stop the time clock.
Right.
Kimberly, do you have help here?
And I don't, this is probably just overcomplicating it, but I was trying to say, I understood why you were kind of going
Right.
that way.
And I'm not sure, Amanda, I think that we don't have enough RAC member. I mean, I appreciate the RAC members that are here, but we have, I think it's not fair to ask Gabby as the single representative of federally recognized tribe on the call to respond for all the tribes. So we probably have to leave it in for now. Kimberly, please. Yeah, she's like, please go ahead.
Yeah, my comments are probably not going to make you feel better, but I guess, so if you were just gonna ask me as it's written today, whether I would support removing it or keeping it, I think I would support removing it, only because I think that it's not solving the problem that you've identified. I do recognize what you're trying to do here, but I can, so again, in my practice, we've really actually tried to separate as much as possible the land use processes and those specific criteria from the discussions with the tribes, and I don't think John is still on the call, but channeling what he said very, very early on about how the process is intended, if it's working the way we want it to create a space to discuss how to avoid adversely impacting a known site. And so while this notice discusses like, okay, this is how we start that conversation, it doesn't lay out, okay, now what, right? So it just puts it into the land use process, which I don't think is set up well at all to deal with this issue. So I know that at least here at the city of Salem, and why I think this probably isn't very helpful, is we've set up our own separate process. So like, you know, if I was writing this to apply to our program here, I would add language that would include, you know, if an adverse effect, a potential adverse effect to a known site has been identified, then the applicant must go through local clearance review and tribal roundtable to discuss how to avoid that. So that, it looks like you're highlighting. Yeah. Oh, I see. So anyway, I just,
Thank you.
yeah, I don't know if that's
Really,
helpful.
John is on, he's on by phone.
John, yeah, I'm trying to circle back to your, we're trying to make things, you know, work out. We're trying to start that conversation, not just.
And
Just-
keep driving, John, stay safe. Star 6 will have you unmute.
No,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm parked now. We're going to be heading into piano lessons here any second, so I'm going to have to turn the volume way down. But
Yeah.
I am listening.
Thank you, sir. Okay. All right, couple other hands. Dave, do you have guidance on this point, sir?
Actually, no, my question was on sub D as in
D is
dog.
a dog.
Yeah,
Right, you're still waiting. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So Kimberly, you know, your opinion matters for sure. I think, you know, as you know, tomorrow, I think what we should probably do is email all RAC members, Amanda, and just ask specifically about this, this clause. Casaria, jump on and let me know if I know we can't have a discussion among commissioners via email. This rules advisory committee is advisory to staff, but Casaria, if you have any concerns about that, let me know. We could certainly blind copy folks and have folks just get back to us rather than a conversation, but Casaria, would that be any guidance there?
We tend to blind copy RAC members and do communication through staff. I know that takes a little bit longer, but it ensures that we don't open up public meeting law
Right.
issues.
Have dialogue. So I think we would email out this question to just make sure that we're heading in the direction that Kimberly and Nick have indicated, which is lose this section. Is anyone uncomfortable with losing it?
Well, not
Amanda?
losing it, but just, and we did get comment on this in the survey, so,
Yeah.
which is why I made this note, and I think it was more than Cassie that made comment on it, so.
Sarah in the last meeting, Sarah was describing her discomfort, because her point was that tribes don't even necessarily know. This assumes tribes know. And it gives maybe a false sense of impression that if it's not identified by the tribe, it's not there. But her point was that tribes don't always know. If I'm correct, I hope I'm correctly representing that.
So I think there's two points here. And maybe it wraps around this question of really whether does this early notice help to inform a complete application? I think that's a big question. If we can answer that question, if the question of that is no, you know, that the determining the complete application is the duty of the city or county, not the tribe to point out that they don't have a complete application, then we don't have that reason to do it. And then the reason to grab the extra 25 days for any input, is that worth sending a notice out before the application is complete? Or do we need to require 2 notices go out? One before the application is deemed complete and one after the application is deemed complete. But that seems like a,
Nick,
you know,
Nick,
it's doubling.
you just blew his mind. We lost Nick.
Yeah.
Amanda, I would say that I don't know that it really fulfills anything. I mean, it is the county's duty to make sure, the city's duty to make sure an application is complete. I'm just scared that if you're gonna create a two-fold notice process, that's a lot of work on both staff and
Thank you.
tribe.
Yeah.
I just understood where we were going with it, and that's what I was trying to explain. I really wasn't saying whether I was supportive or not.
No, and I think you're right. That could have been the origin, because otherwise, why does it say received, that the comments have to be received within 25 days of the mailing? Like if
Right.
we were really trying to get an additional 25 days to the 120 or 150 days, then I don't, yeah, it was a long time ago, and I'm
Right.
kind of lost in a muddle here.
Okay, right now we're trending towards removing, and we could communicate that to the rec members via email for any further articulated concern.
Not
Sure.
removing, just having the notice go out at the same time as any other notice goes out.
Well, you'd remove the reference to 25 days. Right?
Um,
Well, if you probably need to have some sort of time frame, like you wouldn't want a notice to come in at 120 days.
Right.
I mean, a response.
I guess I don't think the way it is written, it was news to me that this was meant to go out before an application was deemed complete. I mean, it doesn't say that. It just says, a notice will go out on a form. And so I was thinking it was supposed to go out at whenever we notice for a land use review. So which is, I presume, is after that it's complete. It doesn't say that it's goes out early, quote unquote.
25 days prior. Okay. Okay, guys, looking at the clock, I want to move us along. So we want your comments on the rest, but so let's run with it. That's the intent, but it would still be, well, I don't know. Yeah, we have to do a little bit of work on this section, honestly.
Yeah.
Anyone on C, or can we get to Dave's D? Let's go for it, Dave.
Thanks. I have some concerns about the language that's used here, and the fact that it has significant potential to be misused. As I read it, if somebody submits something into the record of a quasi judicial application that they think, for whatever reason, that there's an archaeological site on the proposed site of the development, that at that point the local government has to essentially go into determining what appropriate measures are, and there's a long list of them, A through G, all of which are going to the extent that they require any additional information, are going to be part of the requirements of the applicant as part of the land use application, and triggered solely by an email on the last day of the public hearing, the time to submit evidence at the public hearing in front of a hearings officer. And now we've not only have significantly delayed the application, but we've also imposed a significant number of costs. It seems to me, on the applicant, it seems to me that there should be a requirement that something more than just somebody turns something into the record. There ought to be a more legitimate nexus between whatever's entered into the record and the potential for there to be a significant archaeological site, because otherwise this is going to just be another tool to delay from people who don't want, from someone who lives on who has a non-farm dwelling on 10 acres in Deschutes County and wants to stop their neighbor from doing the exact same thing.
Gordon, do you have a response on that point, sir?
Let's see. Okay, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, totally. No,
Yeah, I think going back to the previous item, that's why the 25 days, in answer to the earlier question, was intended to be a notice that went out when an application was received. And so the response would be received before the application was complete, or a determination of this was made, so that the tribal government, tribe brought up an issue the local government could say, wait a minute, we need to resolve this before it's a complete application. And so I think by taking that out and making that throughout the process, you get to the problem that Dave's talking about,
Right.
where someone could show up, on the day before a hearing with evidence that's going to delay things. So that's, but on the other hand, we've talked about the problems with the 25 days and a separate notice that I think Nick brought up or someone else. So it's kind of a conundrum.
But it's not just that, Gordon. It's the fact that I don't think there's any tie-in between the 25 days in B and the language in D. I think the way I read D is that somebody can come in at any point, turn in an email and say, I object to this because I believe there are significant there's a significant archaeological site on the property, on the subject property, and without anything else, the local government is then triggered to determine and recommend appropriate measures listed in sub D, big A through G, and there needs to be, if this were limited to issues raised during the 25-day period, that's one thing. If it comes in at the end and it's brought in essentially to try and kill or delay a project, that's quite a different thing.
Thank you, Cassie. And Keenan, we saw your thumbs up there. Keenan, Cassie, and then Keenan.
Yeah, so can you scroll down a little bit to the bullet points? I want to reiterate a concern that I had. I have several concerns that I submitted in writing that aren't necessarily addressed here, but I want to highlight my concern around number C. C is more than likely going to require an archaeological permit, and as this reads, I want to make sure that if this was to be added to this list or stay on this list, that it remains clear that they still need a permit to do that. I also want to highlight in this section that it is not the business of the state to tell the tribes what their responsibilities and roles are. So the written consent of bracket the tribal council for the tribe with cultural connection to the site, that should just very clearly say written consent of the federally recognized tribe. We should not be telling the tribe who should be providing that written consent. The tribe needs to be the one to decide who has the delegated responsibility for providing that feedback and that comment.
Thanks, Cassie.
My other comments go down into E, so I can hold my hand for that.
Yep. Thank you. Keenan, anything further here?
Yeah, just kind of bouncing back to the 25 days here and Gordon's comment. I guess I'm just still concerned that with the implementation of this 25-day requirement that it's bumping up on the end of the completeness period for applications at almost in all contexts. So I just, again, from a practical standpoint, I'm wondering how that works. Maybe it can be explained by Amanda or something a little bit better, but I am concerned about that. Share Dave's concerns on 5D. Nothing more to say about that. I don't think they're necessarily tied in at all between is that sub B and sub D. So.
Okay. All right, we have to do a little bit of work there. Amanda, anything further right now in this section?
Just a couple things I want to say, and Keenan, I'm sorry, I cannot. Like I said, I'm confused by how this would work, so I can't help. We need more
okay, as long as we're on the same page, right?
So I think it's clear we need to figure that out better. I want to point out Dave's concern. This part here, did you see this? So that measures that arise from application of this section for characterizing and avoiding alterations of a suspected archaeological site or a known site for which boundaries have not been established in ORA will be advisory to the applicant. So everything, and so I want to say that, and then I want to say that this list we've known for a while needs to be relooked at. I just pulled this whole hog, I think, out of Coos County's code, and Jill has even said that she didn't think it was appropriate for a state rule, but we just haven't come back and really thought about what we might want to list as appropriate measures, or maybe we don't want to list anything. And then the clarification, I'd mentioned this earlier, that that when it says everything will be advisory to the applicant except when information has been provided on a site in Aura for which boundaries have been established, then it says here, yeah, this one.
E.
Yeah, E, then because these are the situations, there's not very many of them. I mean, of all the archaeological sites out there, certainly known and unknown or suspected, the ones that are known and that have boundaries around them and are in Aura, is a fairly small subset, but at least we know for sure that a permit is required for alteration of that site. So because we know that already, then that's why this rule says a local government will say a permit's required or a letter from SHPO stating a permit is not required. But in all other situations, which is the vast majority, the local role is just to make sure that there's a conversation about it. Recommendations are made. We can either do that in rule, we could provide guidance for that. And then all of those recommendations are advisory to the applicant.
Dave, does that provide any comfort?
By advisory, Amanda, the application can't be denied if it meets the other criteria and the applicant says, I don't want to
Yep.
do that. And then it's at that point, whoever raised the archaeological resource objection can come to SHPO and make their case.
Yes, I mean, because we don't know. We don't know when an archaeological site will actually be altered, right? Because we don't always know where the site starts. So what this does, what the recommendations do is it puts the applicant on notice so that they should be more aware of the possibility of disturbing a site. And then if that happens, they know that they need to turn to SHPO.
Yeah.
And if they don't, then their consequences presumably would be a little stronger than if they just said, hey, we had no clue what was going on here.
And that's fine, Amanda. I've tried to make this clear and I'll do it again. I'm not complaining if this is used legitimately. I just see the easy potential for this to be used for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with protecting archaeological sites.
Yeah, I get that.
Thanks, you guys. Let's hear from Nick and Gordon. I'd like to ask people to consider 6:15 so we can get through the remainder and keep pressing on. Please let me know if you just.
I just wanted to thank you. I just want to note, that is a change that making the measures from required to recommended, and we appreciate that. You should make sure if you keep this list in there, it's confusing to say requiring a survey or requiring an inventory discovery plan, because there's no basis in the local regulations for requiring any of that. And the rule is advisory. So I assume that would be made. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe we have to replace this list with a new list, and I need help figuring out what goes on the new list.
But the verb is important to us.
It's required, or the right, because it's like you're pointing out, because it's internally inconsistent. You can't have a requirement that's advisory. Okay, so got it. Thank you. I'm gonna keep I'm gonna get increasingly quick here. If it's okay, Nick, I'll turn to Gordon and Cassie on this point.
Yes, Kirsten, thank you. Very quickly. The other thing we thought about was having local governments look at this issue as part of a pre-application conference. And many, if not most local governments do have some sort of required or optional pre-application conference. I think we were thinking of doing kind of one idea was a guidebook, if you are best practices, that would have tribes brought in as part of a pre-application conference that the local government's doing already. The reason we hesitate to put that in the rule is that I don't believe that the state or the agency has ever required a pre-application conference of any city. So, but that would be a best practice to consider going forward.
Right, I keep in the guidance, but also if I could, friendly amendment to your language that tries to be notified and invited. We don't have authority to bring them anywhere. So I just wanted to point that out, little language, just careful caution there. Cassie, please.
My hand is up for point E after the list, if we're done with the list.
Okay, ready for EU guys? No other hands there? Thank you.
Happy to help us move on.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so I have a concern here, a couple of concerns here. One, the states within the established boundaries of an archaeological site recorded in aura. I want to remind everybody that aura is not the be-all end-all of archaeological resource knowledge. Tribes have knowledge of known archaeological sites that are not uploaded into aura. It also takes a while to get sites uploaded into aura. And so I would recommend that this language be replaced with within the known boundaries of an archaeological site, and just leave it at that. That way it's consistent with the requirements of state law. And I also just have a question about the last part of that sentence: obtaining a permit or a letter stating a permit is not required. I cannot think of any examples of situations where ground disturbance was occurring within the boundaries of a known site and a permit was not required. So I just wanted to put that out there, and maybe John can think of an example, but I want to make sure that we're not being inconsistent with that state law.
I cannot think of an example.
I would recommend that piece that statement just be stricken, because
what if on the whole site, ground disturbance occurred where, if there was enough information about the site to know that the ground disturbance that happened wasn't going to affect, I guess I don't know how it works. I mean, could it possibly be that somebody could continue with the development and do it in a way that does not alter the site or an object? Or is it just doing anything on the site?
State law says that you have to have a permit to do any excavation within the boundaries of an archaeological site. And even if you don't anticipate an effect, you have a permit, you monitor, and there's no effect, great, no effect, no problem. But
I guess I'm just imagining you have a development, and now that the applicant has this information, they make some shifts and they make it so now they are no longer going to excavate in the site, but yet their project is on a larger piece of property than just where the site boundary is.
So then you fall outside of the boundaries of the site, and that doesn't apply.
Well, yeah, but except that the application isn't just for development of the site. Let's say the application comes in for a development of 20 acres, and within that 20 acres is a 1 acre known bounded archaeological site. And when the applicant gets the information of that they shift things around, and so they don't touch the site, but the local government permit is for the larger 20 acres. So I think I can imagine a way that avoidance might happen, but at that point you'd need to have SHPO weigh in to make sure that the avoidance really was
permit.
Such that permit wasn't required.
In that case, you need to reword this to say that the proposed development includes or the property where the development is proposed includes the boundaries of a known archaeological site. Right now, this says the development is within the site.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Yes, I know, right, Cassie? Thank you, Cassie. Okay, yeah. Okay.
And development, I guess here development doesn't necessarily mean excavation. I guess that's the thing I'm thinking, but let's work on that more.
Keenan.
Yeah, really quickly, just to confirm my understanding of this, this would only be applicable once it's been determined that you're within the boundaries of a known archaeological site, right? Not just information being submitted that a site may exist.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Right. It seemed to me that this was the only scenario where, from what it was explained to me, that I knew for certain that a permit was was required.
Thanks,
'Cause-
Amanda.
yeah.
Thanks, Keenan. Yep, I'm gonna just move us along, sorry. Okay, I think, Cassie, did you have F or G? Did anyone else have anything on F or G in here? No, okay. All right, you guys, Nick, please.
Yeah, just really quickly, I do have something on G, and a little bit on E. These are requirements put on the local jurisdictions. It's a little bit duplicative. I mean, it's not changing anything. There's always a permit required, but now you're saying the local jurisdiction has to put a condition of approval on there.
The permit is a SHPO permit, Oregon
No,
Archaeological Permit.
No, I realize, but there's
Okay.
a requirement for that we put a condition of approval on there, that we make that statement. I just want to make sure that that's understood. Then on G, again, take out the required, the piece that's required, because we're not going to be requiring anything.
There's one part that could be required under E.
Okay, all right. And so that's really the only thing the local jurisdictions are going to have to do when there's an actual site, is just put a condition of approval on there that tells them that they have to get a permit. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thanks, you guys. Okay, I'm moving towards 6. Which is again section 6, which is protection of landscape areas of cultural significance. And I do have to apologize this across the room to Gordon, because I know he didn't mean bringing the tribes physically. Sorry, Gordon, thank you. I just had to clarify. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. My question or issue, I guess, is on 6B. You have the protection measures determined and applied at the time of annexation. Well, the problem with that is that annexation doesn't occur until after the boundary decision is made, and the boundary decision is predicated on allocating sufficient number of units to meet whatever it is that whatever the city's need is, whether that's employment dirt or housing dirt or otherwise, and so it makes it really difficult for a city to adopt a boundary ordinance, and it makes it difficult for the applicants or for the property owners impacted by that to challenge that, if the determinations are made only to find out later that the potential number of units is significantly scaled back as a result of protection measures that are determined at the time of the annexation, as opposed to the time of the adoption of the boundary amendment.
Yeah, so the reason for this, and this kind of parallels a practice we have with wetlands, is because this process for determining significance and going through the EC, to settle on protection measures will cost money. And at the time of UGB expansion, that money isn't often available, kind of like with wetlands, right? So with wetlands, we know that that if there's wetlands in a UGB expansion area, it's likely, particularly in the valley and places, that some of those wetlands are going to be significant. And so the local government will have to put protections on them, but there's nobody to, there's no money to do that work at the time of the UGB expansion. That's why it was written this way, but I understand what you're saying, and we could take it out.
Well, I mean, honestly, Dave, I did assume that that would trigger a revision of need, and potentially an opportunity for further UGB expansion. So it was in my mind. I'm not the author of the rule, but I've done enough just kind of BLI UGB setups to understand that you'd be taking something out, then the jurisdiction, for example, I mean, Pineville's a good example of successive economic opportunities analysis based on data centers coming in. So they just simply do a one-page update of finding that this land that a data center is now in is, taking up the land, and so they therefore have this much need, so not extensive findings, but a recognition that what was once thought to have been available is no longer available.
I'm going to talk about what I understand right now, and I know we don't have enough tribal representatives to help correct me here, but remember, we have two different kinds of landscape features. One are things you're standing someplace and looking at, right? And so then my understanding is the way you deal with protecting that situation is you might have height limitations or requiring that there's no reflective surfaces that detract from looking at whatever the site, the scenery site is. The other is a site that needs to be stood on, right? Because it's where food is gathered or where ceremonies were held, and it's important to hold those ceremonies there. When we're talking private land, on those kinds of sites, I don't really know how those would get protected, because part of the way the protection is to allow the tribal people who use those sites to use them without other people bothering them, right? And so how do you achieve that on private land unless that land is set aside, and someone pays for it in order to set it aside to allow those activities to happen and to allow maybe tribal access during particular times of the year and nobody else's access during those times of years. So I guess what I'm saying is when we get down to that kind of standing on the ground scale of what a landscape feature is, it's hard for me to imagine how that would affect the use of private property unless the private property owner was willing to accommodate the need or desire of the tribe.
That is the advance. I mean, so that is the lowest hanging fruit, if you will, of the permission for a property owner or series of property owners to understand the resource and recognize its value to current and future Oregonians and work with that. I mean, so we there's no way for us to be prescriptive here except to allow for information to be brought into the public process. It's too many zillion scenarios. Yeah. Dave, you're on the hanging on a thought. I was like, please go ahead and chime in.
I don't want to tell you how you can make this prescriptive, but there are certainly ways. And ways to enforce that and require that upon the applicant, upon the property owner. And so again,
but at what threshold, Dave? So that's the challenge it's challenging. And please give me or Amanda a call to discuss.
Because there can't be a taking.
Of course not. Of course not.
No,
So just for everyone to understand, there's, federal protections against taking a private property, right, without compensation. So we all understand that to be true here. But the idea is clustering of development, set aside willing seller, open space zoning. That, because this is new, we don't have the examples. It's quite challenging. I mean, I think I have kind of in my hope for things that would, processes that would unfold, but I'm speculating.
I think the struggle is because we're used to dealing with known inventoried sites,
right,
and that's how we apply them. And this is not that territory.
That's right. It would be subject to public process, but obviously with understanding, as is in the guiding principles for this rulemaking, private property rights.
This looks a lot like the Scenic Act to me.
Thank you for that. Just note, we'll hold that. We don't have our Wasco County representative here with us who could help flesh out that concern. But thanks for bringing that in, because we want to distinguish ourselves from that in ways that I'm not qualified to even imagine. So but that's not the intent, is to plug and play the those requirements that, so
Yeah,
continue to
I
help us
suspect-
out.
I suspect that Dave did not mean that a statement as a ringing endorsement of that concept.
That's right. Yeah, no, that's right. Okay, well, let's press on, if we could. So I think we were just completing a review of, 6. What else in 6 do folks want to be? When we did actually skirt, Nick's comment at the beginning of the meeting, way back on notice about the effect on tribes. I think that would be just something I would email out the question to Nick. It's sort of in my mind has been asked and answered by the lack of protest by tribes against what's in the rule. I've talked to representatives of tribes who are not present today that have said, let us see the notices, we'll be the ones to decide, but we could certainly put that question out again.
Yeah,
we
and
did
just the
talk about it
I'm sorry.
at a
Just the
previous RAC meeting, and again, I said, are you sure? Are you sure you want this?
Okay.
Exactly,
Yeah.
But I just wanted to, just putting some numbers to it
Yes.
may help.
Mm.
It's 400 in a down year in Portland. It's 900 in a good year.
Yeah, thank you. And that's City of Portland. I appreciate that, Nick. Okay, and then as we have said, rules are not immutable. If we do something that's unworkable, I think we would want to revise. We want workable rules that don't overly burden the proponent of the rule in the first place. Gabby, please, yes.
They turned the lights out on me here in the
Oh
office.
no, we're sitting in the dark.
It's fine. And again, I'm only speaking for Coquel, definitely not for anyone else. And it might have even been something Sarah, my boss, Sarah Palmer.
Sorry, Gabby, we should probably hear you better. It's
Oh
hard
my
for me.
gosh, there we
There you
go.
are. There we
Hi.
are. Yep, there we are.
So again, I'm not speaking, certainly not speaking for anyone else, only partially for Coquel. I think it's something my boss, Sarah Palmer, has said is, yeah, it's going to be a lot of work for us to get those notifications, but we would rather be notified of everything and triage what we can than get a project coming in way after the fact and be like, oh, what in the world is this? Like, we'd rather know beforehand than get caught completely unawares later down the road when they are close to like, oh, well, we're going to start digging tomorrow. And we come back and say like, oh, actually, you're within a site. We would like a monitor there. We would like to talk about this more. We'd rather try and get that as early as possible with those notifications. So again, that's just for us, but we like knowing. It makes everyone's lives much easier. We're all very friendly here at the tribes.
Full and perfect knowledge.
Yeah.
Nick, thank you. Gabby, thank you. Okay, so that was a little bit of flashback to 5. Sorry about that. So in 6, I'm not seeing hearing, there's no hands up. Anything for 7 then?
I think we've covered 7 because this has to do with when we have triggers for bringing a landscape area of this is going to say potentially significant landscape areas. I think we've talked about what brings those forward.
We don't want to talk about 25 days again? Sorry. I know it's getting late. I apologize. I can't even, I'm torn. Sorry about that. Obviously that's a very pregnant question and we will be emailing out about it. So I'm teasing because we could go for another hour. It's complicated and worth more discussion, but not probably this hour. Amanda?
Right. And then for 8, Nick raised this earlier, and it's definitely here in a comment. We need to figure out how this rule could recognize existing programs. And since all the existing programs are all really different, I'm not sure I don't really have a good idea of how to do that because we wouldn't have a way to review them. So it's just still an open question here. We could just list You know, we could list Salem and Portland because you guys are in the room and you want your programs to be recognized, right?
Goose is in the room, Goose Bay's in the room too. So
Um,
that's in the applicability, Steve had suggested possibly in the applicability section. I'll call it, but we would want to obviously take comment on that from tribes as well. Nick, you know,
And
the
like
one is 1990, right? The South Reach is more dated. So it's not without like pause to say, okay, yeah, just carte blanche. We're gonna say, okay, those are good to go.
Right.
Would you maybe set a time period which a county or a city could apply to have it recognized as consistent?
Would there be a way
Salem
to do that without it being a plan amendment, Jill, or I mean, because right now you could definitely submit it as a plan amendment.
Well, I thought this was the idea that if you had already an existing local program and you thought it complied, you would
Right. Yeah.
apply and then you would tell us yes or no, and then that would tell us in the future whether we needed to amend.
Yeah, it's already been subject to a planned amendment and
Oh,
found
yeah.
to be consistent with the goal.
Is Kimberly still on? Was Kimberly's, because that was done kind of in a voluntary way. Was that done as a plan amendment in Salem?
I think we lost Kimberly. I'm so sorry, guys.
Well, it must have been if it has amended their
Yeah,
plan.
it had to have been.
Yeah.
But
Well, I guess it could be a code amendment and not a plan amendment.
Well, because
still.
it's public land, and I
Oh,
mean, they
right.
have some notification about private land, but they're a lot of it applies to public land, so I thought maybe
Oh,
not. I just don't know.
yeah. I
But
see.
anyway, yeah,
So
and
Jill,
with
can you
that-
say a little bit more about that? I'm intrigued because we've been trying to have a third idea here and you might be on to one.
Who were you asking? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Jill, you.
Oh.
You can feel me looking at you. You can feel it.
Well, I mean, I was just thinking that if there was a way to have a compliance review, so you submit your program in a certain amount of time or whatever, and you say, we think we've already complied with this through prior plan amendments and we're already implementing it, would we be able to continue this? Would it be complied with? And we would receive something from maybe,
Staff.
I'm thinking about coastal consistency, right? So I'm just
Right.
thinking like a consistency statement that says,
Right.
hey, you are consistent and you can move on, or maybe you're not consistent, your program's not consistent, and then next time you do some sort of amendment, you need to comply with it, or it would set out some sort of steps. And I don't know how that looks. I was just wondering,
Thank you.
'cause
No, it's
some
a
of us
creative
already
idea,
have.
Jill. Thank you. I was looking for something. Would we, so in in a consistency review, we do take public comment. We make notice and take public
Yep.
comment. So I'm
Yep.
thinking, you're thinking that would be part of it.
Yeah.
And then Gordon, are you still with us? I hope I didn't chase you away with my. Oh, he
I
had-
do have to leave now, but I'll be, is there last thing you need from me or?
Yeah, this was Jill's question about, were you able to hear that thought about existing programs subject in a certain period of time, that inviting local governments to submit for a consistency review with the rule rather than having to resubmit through a PAPA? Is there a mechanism in our existing program to allow for that?
Well, if we write a rule that says that, we can do that, yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we could introduce a third way here a little bit. Okay, good. So thank you. Thanks, Gordon. And Nick, please.
Yeah, I just relatedly, Section 8 sets up a process whereby a local jurisdiction could work with tribes, come up with a program to protect that presumably could have some much more protective features and specific features, provisions that protect archaeological resources. And that's great. I love this option. But the sub E at the bottom specifically says it only replaces resources that are associated with tribal cultural areas. So it would seem to preclude a more rigorous local program to protect other archaeological resources.
Yeah, I don't know if it would preclude a more rigorous, but it could be duplicative.
Okay. Well, it's just something to consider. My global concern is I want to make sure that existing programs are protected and there's options for
Right.
local programs to protect that meet the spirit of this, but perhaps do it in a different way. That's just, yeah, and
The
to
two
look at
biggies,
everything
yeah,
without, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Gotta run.
Cassie, a thumbs up on that. Do you want to put any voice to that, ma'am? Because I'd be curious what you think of, okay. So, okay. It's an interesting notion on Coos County. I mean, if I may, Jill, I think you have said that, yeah, we can talk about it offline. I'm just curious how that works with, yeah, it'd be just interesting. Maybe I'll give you a call. I wish we had, yeah, anyway, wishes were fishes. Okay, anybody else? You guys, thank you. I've worn you out. I apologize. That was a long meeting and right to and through dinner hour. So thank you very much. I'm gonna let everybody go. As practice, would love to turn over to Commissioner Thompson for last words, but let me just see if there's anything I meant to say.
The last word.
She's giving you a wave, saying that be free. So, a short time period where we've been asking for kind of final comments. So we have some issues to work out for sure that you flagged for us. Thank you. We've been calling for final RAC member comments by the 23rd. So particularly if you have anything in addition, certainly if you have anything in addition to what folks have raised today, please let us know. If you have any further thoughts or would like to reiterate a point, please feel free to email us. So I want to thank folks that we haven't heard from today on the call. I always feel better when LCIS is in the room listening. So thank you, Alyssa, for being there after your long day, and to everyone for putting in the time. Commissioner Thompson already gave you her blessing, and I think this is my cue to stop talking and wish you a good night and thank you again. Bye, everybody. Thank you. Take care.
Have a good night.
Bye.
See you. Thank you.